Well, we welcome in everyone here from the Hawkeye of the Storm and Iowa football at the voice of college football. You are watching Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. And yes, it's the final Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson of the season. Don, always bittersweet to be with you here after a bowl game, which means we have to wait another, 8 months before we get real college football, real Hawkeye football back, although we've got some playoff games that I know have piqued your excitement. But first of all, thank you for being part of the show. And the Hawkeyes getting it done today. Unbelievable defensive effort, as always, from Phil Parker's crew. Some bright spots on offense. Let's start, though, with the defense, Don, with the shutout. How hard is it, first of all, to shut out anybody, especially in a bowl game?
It's difficult, Corey, because obviously the game is set up so that teams have ample opportunity to score points. And even if they don't do a great job of driving the length of the field, the nature of the game is that typically your offense puts the defense in a bad spot somewhere over the course of the game. That didn't happen either. Kentucky never enjoyed good field position. I know for sure that 4 possessions started inside the -10, maybe more than that. There were at least 4. So our defense eliminated big plays. I don't know if they had anything beyond 19 yards. I don't know if they ever had an explosive. I remember there was one play for 19. And on top of that, did a great job, of course, of taking the ball away and converting it into points.
Waiting for the official box score. I'm sure it's up on the website, but the media, Iowa's athletics media personnel should be sending out the box score here. We'll be able to go through the official stats. I can tell you this based on an unofficial box score. Joey Labus went 14-24, 139 yards and a touchdown. He was obviously kind of the storyline going into this game. Of course, the Hawkeyes without Spencer Petras and Alex Padilla, each for different reasons. I thought Joe was okay at times, made a couple nice throws, and obviously overthrew Lachey a couple of times. It was a pretty conservative game plan, which
very.
I understand when you're ahead. I had a couple people go after me on Twitter, Don, because I was somewhat critical of play calling at times in this game, and people attacking me because, well, they're up. What do you expect them to do? Well,
Well, the irony there is we threw more passes in the last 2 minutes of the game than we did any other part of the game.
Well, you're right. And Don, obviously winning this game is foremost. I get that. But at the same time, you even said during our preview show, use this game like the first game of 2023. See what you have. And I don't know how running a uber conservative game plan, even while ahead, gets you any more prepared for 2023.
Right.
So we can talk about that. But what were your overall takeaways from Joey Labus?
Well, let me say this. The main difference in the game is that we refused to give our quarterback too much rope to hang himself. On the other hand, Kentucky was happy to make that mistake of giving their quarterback too much rope, and sure as hell he did hang himself. Our defense was super. Specifically about Joey, didn't give him much to do, as you mentioned. Naked, too many nakeds to count. Why middle screen off play action, which is a wonderful concept. But even that can get worn out at times. I think the last of the Y screens was no good. It was for little or no gain. It was a catch by Laporta sometime in the second half. I can't recall. And they started playing the nakeds well, too. So that got us a few first downs at least and a few big plays. Let's face it, if you want to pick one offensive play of the game, let's pick them back to back. You'd pick a Y middle screen to Laporta, not so much for the legitimate yardage on the screen pass, but for the yards after contact. Sam did a great job of breaking tackles on that play. And then one play later, we threw a simple stop route to Lachey, and the corner can't get him on the ground, and that turns into a 15-yard touchdown. So those were our 2 big plays on our touchdown drive. And then, of course, it's inexcusable. They took a couple of shots early in the game, you might recall. I think early in the second quarter, they'd thrown the ball deep twice. Thought it incomplete, but at least they were trying to make a big play. They made the mistake, though, of throwing an intermediate pass. And, of course, it was overthrown, and all Xavier had to do is field the ball and run to the end zone.
A terrible, terrible throw. I mean, it's just a terrible throw, Don.
You don't overthrow balls over the middle of the field. You don't do that. And then worse yet, was throwing unbelievably late to the flat. And of course, that was an easy pick six for Cooper. That poor quarterback, he started off looking left, and then he decided to throw right in the flat. And he threw blind, and maybe not blind, but close to blind. Yeah. And of course, Cooper just ran underneath the throw and almost walked into the end zone.
Let's give credit to Cooper and Xavier for making the plays they needed to make and finishing them off with fantastic returns, which really were the difference in this being a close game in the fourth quarter and being an absolute blowout.
Well, there was one player in particular that had a good shot at Xavier. That was the quarterback. He had a good angle, and he couldn't finish the play either. I think he underestimated Xavier's speed a little bit. We know that Xavier's dangerous when the ball is under his arm, and he proved it on that return. I believe it was a 51-yard interception return, and Cooper's was simple. Of course, Cooper's dangerous with the ball under his arm too. He didn't even need to be dangerous on that play. He literally jogged into the end zone because he only went about a yard deep in the end zone before he had his brakes on and didn't want to bother to go any further. He just went to the front of the end zone. That still counted for 6. He didn't have to run to the back of the end zone even because he was so much under control when he scored.
Excuse me, Don. A couple notes here, and then we can certainly we got Alex waiting on hold. Our phone line is open, folks, 515-635-1601. You can also join by means of the StreamYard link. Excuse me. A couple notes, though, before we get to our listeners here, Don. And I thought Louis Riddick, who, by the way, does a very good job. I'd like to see him on more calls. I think he's just a very skilled, obviously former player, very skilled at what he does in commentating. But he made a point of complimenting Brian on that first drive. You could tell Brian made a concerted effort to mix in a lot of motion, a lot of play fakes. And I thought some of that misdirection got Kentucky off balance. Certainly caught them off guard, and give Brian credit because that early drive, which, they got a few first downs in that first drive, that was able to really ensure field position early. And then, of course, Iowa special teams and defense kept the sorry about that. We're going to turn that down. Kept field position throughout much of that first half. Just talk about the first drive and what you saw Brian Ferentz trying to accomplish by means of play calling.
Well, we won and we deferred. And as I recall, in the first drive, I believe Kentucky, on their first possession, they did have one first down. Punted to us. We moved the ball a little bit, I think, for 1 or 2 first downs. But every time we traded punts, of course, we picked up yardage. And that was especially noticeable when you factored in punt returns. That one punt return, I've got it written down. How long was that? 34 yards unofficially, at least. I had it down for 34. That was really our first explosive play. It was a 34-yard punt return. And but here's this stuff that aggravates you. And talking about big plays in the kicking game, the next big play in the kicking game, punt from the -47 down on the 2. So that was a 51-yard punt that was killed on the 2-yard line. Incidentally, on that next possession for Kentucky, a really nice critical down open field tackle by Sebastian Castro that forced a punt. I believe they were only maybe 3 yards away from a first down, and Sebastian got, I believe it was the quarterback, as I recall, got him on the ground without any problem. That left us finishing the first quarter scoreless. And now we can mention specifics about first touchdown in a game. I'd mentioned going in, really important to score the first touchdown without giving any details. Here's the truth. In these 18 games that were played between us, 9 apiece, 9 for us, 9 for Kentucky, the record if you scored the first touchdown was 15-2, 88% win. That's why it was important to score the first touchdown. And as soon as we were up 7-0, I felt good, and shortly thereafter we went up 14-0. Then I felt really good because I couldn't see us losing a 14-point lead on an offense that was that inept versus a very good Iowa defense, not to mention a really outstanding kicking game. So that's kind of how the game played out. It wasn't very exciting to watch, but it was certainly, there's nothing wrong with the a routine win, and we certainly had one today.
All right, to our phone line caller, we're going to put you on hold. We'll get over to Alex. We'll come back to you. Alex, welcome to the show, sir.
Good. How's it going, guys? It's been a long time. How you been?
Been a long time. Looks like you've been growing a beard since the last time you were on here. Is this no shave December?
No, it's obviously in Iowa it gets a little colder, so it's one of those where and it's really patchy. It's my Irish red beard, brown hair, or lack thereof, I guess.
Looks like you should be wearing plaid and dancing around in the.
I don't look good in plaid.
What do they call those male dresses?
Wearing a kilt. A kilt.
Kilt.
God, no, oh God, no. Yeah, plaid, no, not so good. Kilt, no, definitely not. But I mean,
think today, Alex.
I mean, defense obviously played really well, and I was really excited after that first drive. Brian Ferentz, I think, called a good first series, and then after that, he went to very typical Brian, conservative, run the ball 2 times and screen pass on the third. Understandingly, you have a freshman quarterback first-time start against a good Kentucky defense. You don't want to put the ball in harm's way, but you had success in that first series, and then they totally went away from it, which was really just mind-boggling. And then on one of their third downs, they were second and 2, halfback dive, 3rd and 1. Then they try a post route to Laporta.
Well, hold on a second. So let me ask you this, Don. I want to make before we move on. So, and comparatively, from my perspective, and I agree with Alex, first drive, you saw Brian. He obviously had a plan on the first drive from scrimmage, which is credit to him for having that plan. But then it seemed like after that first drive, and I understand, again, a lot of this game was field position control, and that helped them gain field position early. But it did seem like Brian and this offensive staff went away from what was working on that first drive, and it seemed like you just kind of went right back to Iowa vanilla brand conservatism as it relates to the offensive play calling. What changed, and why do you think it changed from drive 1 through the rest of the game?
Well, I think as soon as we went up 14-0, then for sure we went into uber conservative mode. We weren't going to take any chances at that point. I certainly understand that, because unless we gave them some help, they weren't going to be able to beat us. Our defense was just simply too good, and they were too inept on offense to really challenge our defense very well. The way the game started, just to set the record straight, our first 2 plays were both nakeds. They were both naked at 1. They fake left, roll right. 2 different faking backs. One, I think, was a fly sweep, as I recall. I can't remember for sure. But we ran naked twice for modest yardage. The third play was the misdirection Y screen in the middle screen. And then on 4th and 2, that followed. 4th and 2, you remember what happened there? We passed up a 50-yard field goal attempt.
Yeah. It was a 51. It was a 51-yard field goal attempt.
Well, right. I'm not sure of that, simply because we were on. Let me get my yard line straight.
We're
on the 30. We're on the 32 and a half.
34, Don.
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, I've got it written down. I can tell you in about 2 seconds. Okay. Let's split the difference. I see 33. According to the box score, 33. So
trust me, if you go back and look, it's the 32 and a half, because I thought about, do I call it a 50 or 51? As you know, nowadays they spot the ball deeper than 7.5, maybe as deep as 8. So it would have either been 50 or 51.
And now, I agree. I think you kick the field goal in a game that we expected points to be hard to come by.
Yeah.
Kick a field goal there.
Yeah. Now, what I didn't know, and I'm still not sure, it didn't appear that the wind was much of a factor in either direction. So I did wonder about the wind. I thought, well, but that doesn't make sense, because if we deferred and they took the ball, logically you would think we would take the wind. If that's the case, we had the wind at our back even. Yep. So I don't know why they didn't take the field goal attempt. We threw incomplete on Y flat. We ran a flat route to Sam and threw high, as I recall. And that left us with a lost opportunity in terms of hitting a field goal or pooch punting if we wanted to go that route. I guess we weren't going to do that.
Just for the record, but going back to Alex's point here, You said once we hit 14 points, we went uber conservative. Well, just for the record, they had the 7-play, 45-yard drive, which resulted in a turnover on downs. Then their next two possessions were 3 yards and out, or 3 plays and out, 3 plays and out. Then came the touchdown. So I felt like they went conservative before they even got on the board, Don. I thought it was 0-0, and they went kind of conservative.
I don't know what happened on those next 2 possessions, other than I do recall we came out throwing the ball in the first possession, more or less, right? And then second and third possessions, I think we made a little more of an attempt to run the ball. Very, very modest success. A couple of yards here, a couple of yards there. And of course, Kentucky's a good, solid run defense. And as you mentioned, we couldn't generate any traction there. And then finally, we had a little bit of a shorter field. We were on the plus 42, I guess, because I believe it was a 2-play drive, wasn't it? The touchdown drive. I believe that was a first down to Laporta.
It was the screen pass to Laporta, then the pass to Lachey.
2 plays, 42 yards for a touchdown.
2 plays, 42, and of course the middle screen was thrown theoretically it's thrown behind the line, right? Sam caught it on or near the line of scrimmage.
It was about a 3-yard pass, and he made, I think I counted 7 or 8 missed tackles.
But you can't catch the ball downfield because we have linemen downfield. Right?
So it was behind the line of scrimmage, what you're saying.
It was thrown on or near the line. They'll give you a little bit of latitude. I think we caught it right on the line of scrimmage. One time I thought I was a little fearful that I think it was 77. Is that Colby? They could have flagged him maybe for being downfield. He was just a couple of yards downfield. No flag. Play stood. But anyway, 42-yard drive just on the strength of yak yardage by the 2 tight ends. Really, the middle screen would have been worth just a little bit, except for Sam's run. And then, of course, the stop route would have been, if they could have tackled us, Lachey would have gained 5 yards with the stop route rather than 15. The corner turned him down, you might say. Didn't really make much of an effort to tackle him. The size mismatch, of course, but shame on that corner for not making a bold effort to get Lachey on the ground. So 7-0 seemed huge, though, I'll say that. It was 0-0 at the end of 1 quarter. Incidentally, the number 2 parameter in terms of reliability and identifying the winner was first quarter scoring. Well, we were 0-0, of course, the end of the quarter, so that was out the window. That one, incidentally, over the all 18 games was 13-2, 87% win if you have the lead after 1. And I see what Bob says. You were right, Coach. We won 2 out of 3 and 1. Defensive specialty teams clearly won. You might argue, it's kind of hard to argue that our offense outplayed their defense. I don't know did we gain 200 yards in the game? If we did, we barely did.
200 yards. We're wondering if we gained 200 yards for the game, Don.
Yeah.
No. Oh my goodness. Yes, they did. 206.
206. Okay. But in our defense, let's face it, a couple of times we didn't get on the field. After the pick sixes, of course, that meant that we had to watch our defense play the next series of downs also, right? Because we had to kick off after we scored the points.
Alex, we got a couple callers, but I'll give you the floor here.
All right. Now, the last couple things, I mean, the big question again I had, I mean, it was when at the end of the half, Iowa calls their last time out to get the ball back. They get up offsides, get 5 extra yards, and they run a halfback dive. It's like, take a shot. I was really confused by, let's call our last time out so we have some time to get the ball back, and we run a halfback, dive. Why, what's the point of wasting that time out and potentially muffing the punt, giving Kentucky a great field position to get points on the board. And I'll just make this comment because I've seen some comments pop up as you guys were talking about some of the offensive plays that, they say, we're never happy with, it's an Iowa win, be happy, everything. Like, I'm happy that Iowa won, but you kind of said, like, think of this as a game of like 2023, your first game of 2023, see what you have. And it's kind of more of the exact same. I think just Iowa fans, myself included, Corey, someone said you're being too critical. I don't know who said it, but it's just like, well, we've seen this all year. And from what we're hearing, there's going to be no change as it stands right now. There's going to be absolutely no change. And it's so frustrating as Iowa fans. It doesn't matter who we get in. We have Cade, we have Eric all coming in from both Michigan. I know we have a couple wide receivers coming in from recruiting, but at the same time, we're just like, okay, we're sticking with the kind of the main problem we've had all season, which is Brian Ferentz and Kirk Ferentz and Gary Barter's. The lack of response from them to do anything it's really disheartening as Iowa fans, because I want to be excited about this team next year. But as it stands right now, I'm happy that we won. I think this defense and special teams again will be great next year. But it's the offense. What's this offense going to look like? And I don't trust Brian. I don't trust Kirk to make radical changes. Now I know Devontae Vines had commented or put out on his Twitter post that he said that he's confident changes will be made. But what does that mean? What changes does that mean? So outside of, getting a new offensive coordinator, I don't see this offense being as, I don't think they'll be as bad as they were this year, but I don't see much improvement.
Well, I appreciate this comment from Italicus. I appreciated this as well. Matt Berry and Louis Riddick, who I thought both did a pretty good job in this broadcast.
Beginning of the game, they were really they were very complimentary of Kentucky's quarterback, and they were basically saying that this quarterback is going to make this defense really scared and everything like that, until Iowa got a couple pick sixes and they kind of changed their tune. It was pretty much in that first quarter. After that, they were pretty I feel like they called an even game after that first quarter, when they were really hyping up that quarterback, because he's a mobile quarterback, and he's like, oh, he's going to make defenses scared and everything like that. And it's like Iowa isn't a top defense, or we haven't seen this type of quarterback before. But
at the end of the game, they made a point of saying, talking about how Iowa could have been with an offense, and that's a fair point. So you can question the offense next year, and that's fair. I question the offense this past year in the sense of this was a historically good defense, and there's nothing wrong with looking back and saying, yeah, you ended up 8-5. But you ended up 8-5 with an absolutely phenomenal defense and an absolutely phenomenal special teams unit. That should be unacceptable. From a standpoint of our goal is to be great as a football program. That's where my criticism comes in. Yes, I'm with you. You're happy with a win, Don, but you're not satisfied. And if we're satisfied, if the coaches are satisfied, the players are satisfied, then they shouldn't be here, because being satisfied with being 8-5 should not be good enough. And I mean, let's be honest, this defense and special teams unit is championship quality. If you had some semblance of an offense, you're probably looking at, at
least 10 wins.
At least.
Well, it's not hard to imagine 11-2, right? Because only two teams beat us convincingly.
Yeah,
just two.
Michigan and Ohio State. Well, I mean, you can maybe count Nebraska in that, but
true.
Even with the better offense, we probably made that game a little more interesting, if not maybe tied it.
Yeah.
Well, the mystery as it relates to Nebraska, of course, is if they had a vulnerability, it was their run defense, and yet we didn't try to run the ball, really.
When we did run the ball, we would get chunk yards, and then we went right away from it, which was,
right.
I watched the game, was really puzzling, but, that's over a month ago, so,
Alex, I appreciate your calls as always. We're going to have just kind of give everybody a preview. We're going to be doing a wrap-up show here in a couple of weeks with Coach Patterson. So this is not the final show of the year. It is a final post-game show, but hope to hear from you then, and appreciate you being a part of the show all season.
Yep, and hey, guys, I hope you guys had a wonderful holiday and have a happy New Year. Hopefully you guys have that wrap-up show sometime weekend. I work nights during the week, so hope I'll tune in for them. But again, have a happy New Year to everybody. To you both, Don and Corey, I really appreciate you guys coming on, letting us fans come on here and kind of speak our mind, get things off our chest, vent, celebrate whatever the case is. I think it's really great that you allow us to do that. And then everyone on here who's commenting, please, again, like the video. I think Corey and Don do a great job. I personally don't follow the basketball, but go on there and watch with, I believe, Gary Close is when you do the post games with him. So
yep.
The last thing I'll say for the final year, have a happy New Year. Go Hawks.
Thank you, sir.
You do the same, Alex.
Yeah, but for the record, I don't care what anybody says, and everybody has a right to their opinion. The tandem here from the Hawkeye of the Storm with you and Coach Close is the best, Don. Like there is no better tandem for Hawkeye athletics than having Don Patterson and Gary Close on after every major Iowa athletic event. So thank you, and thanks to Gary Close, because you guys are phenomenal.
Thank you, Corey.
Let's get to our caller who's been waiting patiently on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Hey, it's Alan from North Carolina. Really love the contact, Corey, and Don, love your insight throughout the year. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Couple of comments on today's game. First of all, on defense, when I watch Wampa and when I watch Graves, they look like next level players. I know that this was the first opportunity we really saw Wampa show his stuff. He looks like a guy in 2 years that has a chance to be a first rounder on the next level. He's just so athletic. It was great to see him show his stuff today, and I think he's going to be a fantastic player. And I'm curious to see if Graves builds up his mass to be more of an inside guy, or is he more of an outside guy? Another comment on defense, as in regards to Jack Campbell, going to the next level, what type of player do you see him being on the next level? Is he a tweener? Is he more of a Josie Jewell? Is he a guy that can play all three downs? Just your insight on that before I have a comment on their offense.
Well, first of all, I'll just give my thought, and then I'll turn it over to you, Don. The Aaron Graves comment is, I think you're right on. And Don, there was nobody higher on Aaron Graves out of high school than me. I just thought that kid was going to be, still think he's going to be elite. And absolutely, I mean, Xavier Wampa was a 5-star for a reason. I thought Aaron Graves certainly was under-recruited primarily because he committed to Iowa so early, but that kid was a national phenom. I'm starting to think maybe he ends up inside, Don, because he's a big.
I see him more as an inside player. He's just going to be a big kid. He's already a big kid.
Yeah.
I think he's a better matchup to be inside than outside.
I mean, you like the idea of him playing outside because of his pass rushing skills, but
I like him as a 3 technique. You know, typically if you're in 4-down football, one of those defensive tackles is going to be a 3 technique. He's going to be outside shade of the guard, and fundamentally the way protection would typically work, he's going to be one-on-one against the guard. I like Graves working against the guard and having a 2-way go versus that guard, and not having the center there to help. So I see him as really being able to overpower all kinds of offensive guards in this league. Not that he couldn't overpower an offensive tackle too, but the advantage of playing inside, of course, is a more direct line to the quarterback. You know, you're rushing on more of a direct line to get up in his face and cause him problems.
And then what was your second comment, caller?
When I look at a Jack Campbell, I try to envision what type of player he is on the next level. I'm a huge Jets fan, and I love his game. But to me, he seems too big to play inside. I mean, I think he's 6'5", 250, and I worry on the next level that he might be too big and may not be fast enough to be a 3-down lineman. What do you guys think before I ask a question on the special teams and on the quarterback position?
You've heard me say before, Corey, he reminds me of Urlacher. I think that's a good analysis. And I know Urlacher wasn't that big coming out of college, but he played linebacker at probably 245, 250, I think. I don't recall exactly what he weighed as a Chicago player, but he certainly was one of the best at the time. And he had that same kind of long frame that our guy has. So I see Jack as being a really, really solid inside backer along the lines of an Urlacher. They like him tall if they can find him, because let's face it, any number of passes, Jack's been able to get his fingertips on any number of balls that were meant to be thrown over the linebacker. So that gives him a little more value than a shorter linebacker, such as Josie. Josie's got a great nose for the ball, but I like the idea of a fence post linebacker being taller, more like Jack. It's a little more difficult to get the ball over him.
I love watching his game, and I can't wait to watch him on the next level. 2 other comments, one positive, one negative. I know, Corey, you had mentioned that you think Torrey may come back, but watching the way he punted today, and now that NFL scouts can watch him on this level, I can't see him coming back. This guy has a chance to be the top punter on the next level. The way that he kicked today was just outstanding. I feel like he's ready to play on the next level. And the comment on the quarterback, what frustrated me, and especially after that first drive, is I'm thinking to myself, Cade McNamara is watching this game and watching the way that Brian's calling this game. He must think to himself, he must know something, because the way they called that game after that first drive would have frustrated any quarterback. And I know that Cade got a nice chunk of change to come here, but there must be something behind the scenes to think that maybe this was Brian's final game as an offensive coordinator. Because if I'm Cade and I'm watching the way he called that game, I know it's a first-year quarterback, a guy who had never played on this level, but some of the calls and some of the schemes after that first drive would drive any quarterback nuts. What do you think? And Don, do you think that this might have been Brian's final game as OC? Because if I'm Cade, I'm watching that, I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
You want to go first, Craig?
Yeah, I mean, I can go first. I'll sum it up with this. I don't know if you're right or wrong. I did hear Brian Ferentz, and by the way, we're going to play a clip from Brian here in a little bit. We're excited about the win, but I do want to play a clip that kind of disturbed me from yesterday's press conference. But Brian was asked specifically about promises that may or may not have been made toward Eric All, but I think specifically Cade McNamara, and he answered, quite frankly, no, there have been no promises made to those guys. So somebody's not telling the truth. That's just all there is to it. I'm not calling Brian a liar, but when Cade McNamara says that they've assured me they're going to open it up, like that's sort of counteracting what Brian said yesterday. So somebody's not telling the truth there. Whether that's because Brian's moving on or not, I don't have an answer for that. I've told you, and I've told you, Don, every indication that I've gotten from people who I believe to be reliable sources, they're not telling me, yes, I think this is going to happen, or no, this isn't going to happen. But kind of reading between the lines, I have gotten no indication from those individuals that there's going to be a change. Now, maybe there will be. Maybe Kirk's keeping this on the down low, and certainly to save face, Brian may find another job and have that lined up, and he doesn't want to appear like this has been planned for a few weeks. I don't know the answer to that question, but Don, can you answer our caller's question? Do you believe this was Brian Ferentz's final game as Iowa's OC?
No, I do not. I don't think so. I'll tell you one reason I say that. You might recall a comment that Kirk made a while back in time after the regular season ended. He mentioned that we're going to go back after the season and look at all aspects of our program. And then he went on to say, I don't think anything's broken. You remember that phrase? I don't think anything's broken.
Sorry. Yeah, I got to compose myself. Yes, I did. Yes.
Yeah, my thought when I heard that was, if we're ranked 130 out of 131 in total offense, then the offense is broken. It is broken. And that was the impression I had at the time. I don't know what Cade knows. It's kind of hard for me to believe that Cade would commit to come here without some assurance that the offense was going to be more aggressive with play calling than what this one's been this year.
And that's what I'm thinking, because if you're Cade and you're watching this, and there had to be something behind the scenes. If there isn't, then that's an indictment on the AD. I mean, I know that you've been very critical of Barta, Corey, and if you're watching this today, you have to just take him to task, because this offense going forward, the way they called the game after the first series and the way their offense performed the whole season, and Brian Ferentz keeps his job after this, I mean, then this team and this program is accepting mediocrity, because this defense had to carry them the entire year. They carried them today. Their special teams was fantastic, but their offense, if they allow Brian Ferentz to call another play going into 2023, then Gary Barta has to be taken to task on this, because this is an embarrassment. Unless McNamara just got a boatload of money and just wanted to cash in, which I agree with Don. I can't see him being a guy who just comes here strictly for the money. But the idea that he's going to come here and no changes will be made, it's just a knock on the AD And it's basically the AD just listening to the coach and not doing anything to make changes. And that's a really troubling sign.
Yeah, let me just say one thing, and then we can move on. And I know, listen, I appreciate your questions, and I know we're gonna get ripped. I'm gonna get destroyed in the chat by the apologists and the people who say, well, why you're 30 minutes in and you're already complaining. You brought it up, for the record. You brought it up, caller. So
I did. I brought it up. I'll take the shot.
I will say this comment that was made yesterday by Brian. He was quoted as saying, and I heard him say it. He said, "I would say I did the best I could this year with the pieces we had to try to put this team in a position to succeed." So the problem with that statement,
that's a joke.
Well, the problem with that statement, there's a couple problems. First of all, my initial reaction to, well, the best you got isn't good enough. I mean, it's very simple. The best you got isn't good enough. So that means we need to change. Second thing I'll say, when you're ensuing or implying that personnel was not good enough for you to be as successful as you wanted to be, whose fault is that? This isn't the NFL. This is college football. You are responsible for recruiting. You are responsible for developing. And if you're failing on any of those fronts, the buck stops with you. So I don't want to hear this stuff about how you didn't have good enough personnel and you didn't have the pieces good enough to be successful. Whose fault is that? I mean, whose fault is it that you lost Charlie Jones? Whose fault is it that you're losing Arlen Bruce, Keegan Johnson? I thought that was I was disturbed by a couple comments made yesterday by Brian, and that comment bothered me because, it's almost like you're ripping the kids in a. Am I reading that wrong, Don? When you say we didn't have the pieces, or I did the best.
The suggestion was we didn't have good enough personnel.
Yeah, so you're kind of ripping the kids that you recruited and failed in developing. That's how I look at it. Caller,
right.
You read that? Did you read that differently?
Absolutely, you are 100% right. And to me, I mean, it's a shot against the AD. The AD, to me, is petrified of losing his job because he's trying to appease the coach. That's what I get out of it. If any other AD in a top program would see what's going on and would tell the coach, either he goes or you go. And I think that the AD is petrified on losing his job, or he just doesn't want to make changes. That's a major problem going forward. And that's why I think in the back of my mind, and I agree with Don on this, there is no way Cade McNamara came here strictly for the money. I just can't see it. It makes no sense. He was a top signal caller in the portal, and he would come to Iowa strictly for a buck rather than come here for the money and the ability to make changes. And he just came here strictly for the buck, that's a knock against him. If he came here and there's no changes made, that's a knock against the AD. And I think it's a real troubling sign going forward for this program. And I appreciate everything that you guys have done throughout the season. Continue good luck and Happy New Year to all you guys. I love the contact, especially here down in North Carolina, where I have to listen to ACC football all year long. So I really appreciate it, and thank you so much for everything.
Thank you for the call, Ryan. Appreciate you listening. Hey, great call. And he's not alone. We got plenty of Hawkeye fans down there in the Carolinas, including Drew Stevens. He's from that area, and I know. Look, the whole situation with Brian is troubling, Don, because at least this is my opinion on the situation. I don't know how you defend bringing a guy back who's put up the results that he has these last 2 years. I mean, these have been historically bad offenses these last 2 years. I'm very frustrated by it, and I'm past the point of waiting and seeing. And if I get ripped and lose viewers because I'm being staunch on my feelings even after a win, I don't care. And I know you're limited with what you can say, Don, and I respect that. But I agree with you. Do I think he's gone? Probably not. But I'm disappointed in Kirk Ferentz if that move isn't made, and I'm very disappointed in Gary Barta as the AD, who's supposed to be Brian's boss. And Gary was quoted yesterday as saying that he's going to be more involved than he normally would, but he will still defer to Kirk. How can you say that when you're supposed to be legally? You're supposed to be Brian's supervisor. It's not supposed to be Kirk.
Not to mention you're in charge of the entire athletic department.
Yeah, I just that bothers me, and Do I believe that Gary's going to put Kirk over his leg if Kirk makes the wrong decision? No, I don't. And it's a top-down problem. So, anyways, we can get off this subject. We've got callers who are waiting, and if other callers want to bring it up, they can. But let's get to OS for Hawks, who's been on hold for quite some time. OS for Hawks, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you and Don. Before I forget, Happy New Year, and I hope you had a wonderful holiday season. I want to talk about the offensive line.
Okay, good conversation. Absolutely.
You just mentioned it. Our offense in the last 2 seasons, and I am a long time Hawkeye follower, long time, and I'm a former offensive lineman myself in the day. I'm old. I'm older like Don than I am Corey. Anyway. I see the offensive line this year. The play has been poor across the board, and I'm not knocking the kids because I'm sure that they play their hearts out. I love my Hawkeyes, but we have had an offensive line problem, and until we fix an offensive line problem, we are going to have offensive woes. And I think Don would agree. I mean, the foundation of your offense is your offensive line. You have to protect the quarterback, and you have to be able to run block so that you can score points. And I watched the offensive line today again. I don't remember what was the 3rd or 4th down play, 52 for Kentucky. On a 4th down play, didn't get blocked and tackle somebody in the backfield. How does that happen on an offensive line? That's my point. Another play I saw, 77, is that Plum or
Colby.
On a I can't think of the name. Sorry. He pulls. Defensive lineman goes around the back side of him and still makes the tackle. He never touched anybody. On not a crackback block, but on a anyway. I guess what I'm saying is that I see the biggest part of our offensive woes being on the offensive line, and I think that's got to be a major point of emphasis going forward. I love that we won today. The other thing I wanted to bring up, Corey, is what you said earlier about how good we were on special teams and defense. And my question is why isn't the offense seem to be held to the same standard? That's my biggest question. And that's all I have to say.
Well, it's not really, not to interrupt you, but it's really not, I mean, not to sound facetious, it's really not a question, right? I mean, you know the answer to that question, right? You're just kind of, you're offering a rhetorical, correct?
Well, it hasn't been, yes.
I mean, the answer to that question is who the offensive coordinator is and his relationship to Kirk. That's the sad thing about this. We all know that's the answer. Everyone knows that's the answer. That's what makes it so ridiculous. That's the answer. You answer. Yeah. I mean, you can answer it in the question. Why isn't Brian Ferentz held to the same standard as Phil? Well, he's Brian Ferentz. I mean, not ripping him. That's just the reality of it.
Yep. Good point, I guess.
I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than that. That's these, and I see some of the people in the chat, and I respect everybody's opinions on here, but these people who say, well, points are what matter. Yards don't matter. Well, that's true ultimately. But guess what? In the 5 losses this year, they didn't score enough points. All right. They lost a game 9-6. All right. They won a game 7-3 in which the defense outscored the offense against an FCS team. They lost a game 10-7 to Iowa State. I mean, come on. Let's not go with the whole points are all that matters. I mean, we can go over all the metrics, red zone efficiency. How about critical down efficiency, Don? How about in this game, Iowa for the game, 0 for 13 on 3rd and 4th down. I mean, come on. And Kentucky was really bad too. Give credit to Iowa's defense, but this is the type of thing we see week in and week out from Iowa's offense, not just against the best defenses. And there were games I give Brian credit. I thought he called a really good game against Purdue. They played well against Northwestern. So it's not like he's incapable of calling a good game or having a drive like in the first drive of this game where I thought he called a pretty good series of plays. But This is like, I feel like I'm having this deja vu. We're having the same conversation we had a year ago. Multiple problems require multiple solutions, and they've made, to me, they have addressed one of the problems, and that's the quarterback position. But the quarterback position, unfortunately, is not the biggest problem. It may be the biggest problem personnel-wise, but offensive line, OS for Hawks, as you said, offensive line's still a problem. They have not addressed that as of yet in the portal. And certainly wide receiver's a problem. But I think coaching right now is the biggest issue, because this is a pattern. And, I don't know what else to say other than that. Don, do you have any insight on the situation here? What about critical downs?
I lost you for a minute, Corey.
Are you with us, Don?
Yeah, you're back now.
Yeah, you have any insight on this? Critical downs? Or
Well,
any of this?
here's one thing. You've asked me in the past, Corey, what can we do to have a more efficient offense, a more productive offense? And one of the things I've said, and it hadn't changed, if we have more variety within our plays, that makes you more difficult to defend. And I found myself saying today, well, if you can defend naked, and if you can defend wide middle screen, then there's really not much for you to worry about, because we're not really capable of doing anything else. Those plays hit for us, but we kind of wore them out as the game played on. They defended them better over time. We just need more diversity in our play selection than what we have. We don't have enough plays. I mean, that's honestly, and people might say, well, how could we not have enough plays? You got to understand, smart linebackers, they first off notice personnel. Every time the bench signals to them what the personnel is on the field, excuse me, they don't even have to figure it out themselves. They look to the bench. There's a guy over there up a sign that says 11, 10, 21, whatever the case might be. They know personnel. It takes them not very long at all to identify a formation or a backfield set. And at that point, they've really been able to zero in a lot on what plays are coming. And I know you've quoted some players from other teams that said that helped us a lot. We had a great idea of what was coming. That's the truth. We can be better on offense if we have more diversity within our play selection, have more plays that can run, that can do more things. And today's a good example. Wide middle screen was a good play for us, and I'm glad we had it in, because it's a very deceptive play. But we even wore that one out. The last time we ran it was a gain of 1 maybe. And, of course, nakeds are obvious. And one thing we don't hardly do is run naked to the left. But if we're faking to the offense's left, you better be prepared for naked, because we like to roll right on naked and throw the ball, typically to Sam or maybe Lachey. And that's been a good, solid play for us. But the problem with naked is before too long, they're coming up the field and they're not really worried about chasing a play down from behind that's going away from them. They're just focused on pulling up the quarterback. And as the game went on today, you saw people up in our face more on nakeds, and we had to throw the ball in a hurry to get rid of it. And sometimes we connected, sometimes we didn't. But the bottom line is you need to do more things than just a few, because if you're only doing a few things, the defense can focus on taking those few things away. That's about as honest as I can be.
Anything else, caller?
Just one last thing. I did want to say on a positive, I thought that Labus played very well today for his first start. Didn't turn the ball over. I think he did more than an adequate job at quarterback. And like I said, again, Happy New Year. We'll talk to you later. Sir. Thank you.
I thought Labus was okay. I mean, I wasn't blown away, Don, but they didn't utilize his feet nearly as much as I wish they had. That'd be my biggest criticism. I wish we could have seen him. It sounded like throughout bowl practice that he struggled through the air, and he struggled for the most part through the air. I mean, the completions he made in the yardage, a lot of his yardage came on that one drive, most of which was off of Sam Laporta dump down, in which Sam, like you said, the yak yards were significant.
Right. I laughed at myself. You might remember this. There was a sequence in there where we ended up with a delay penalty. Should not have happened. We broke the huddle way early, and Labus simply didn't pay any attention to the play clock. And so, do you remember what the next call was after the delay of game? it was a Q draw. And I remember chuckling, well, they're trying to punish Labus, saying, okay, fine, you gave us a delay, go ahead and run Q draw. We ran it for 10. The only problem, it was 18 yards needed at that point. So that 10 yards is still kind of hollow yardage because we still ended up having to punt.
Let's get to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey, I am going to comment. Go Hawkeyes.
All right. Go Hawkeyes. Sounds good. All right, let's get to our next caller. The phone line is open. We've got people here on StreamYard. Let's get Ryan into the mix. Ryan, welcome to the show. To our next caller. The phone line is open.
They hung up on her. She could have had.
Hello, Ryan. Are you here? Hello, Ryan. We can't hear you, sir. No, you are MIA, sir. Let's see if you can get that problem figured out. Let's go to our next caller. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Patterson. Who's on the line?
Hey, Corey. It's Ryan from McGregor.
Hey, Ryan.
I just want to thank you guys for doing the show. I think you guys are nailing it quite thoroughly. Don, I really appreciate your comment as far as the diversity of the play calling. I put on the chat a couple times whether or not. Well, let me tell the story first and why I'm asking the question. All right. There was a few years back where Barry Alvarez was the AD at Wisconsin and was asked to coach the Wisconsin team who were playing Auburn. And I'll never forget Barry was, you know, when they asked him to coach the team for Wisconsin, he said, well, you guys aren't tough enough. You know? And what he did is he instituted two-a-days, and they ended up winning like 34-31. And most of the Badger players credited the workouts that were tremendous prior to the bowl game as the reason why they won. The thing that discouraged me the most about the game today is I didn't see any improvement in the O-line. I really thought for sure that, you know, they would be doing two-a-days to get ready for this bowl game. And I don't know if they did or not, Don. Maybe you know if they did, but it didn't look like it to me. And I didn't see really any improvement from the Nebraska games today with regards to the offensive line play. And it was disappointing in that respect. I mean, I'm glad Iowa got the win, but, you know, all the callers are right in talking about frustration with some really innovative plays, diversity of plays, contingency plans, as you like to call them, or I like to call them, I guess. They had that, and then all of a sudden they got away from it and went back to the business as usual of, you know, three plays and punting. So what do you think, Don? Did they do enough bowl prep to really make themselves a better football team today or not?
Well, I can see where you would wonder, looking at the O-line performance during the game, wonder if how beneficial those bowl workouts were for our O-line that was out there playing in the game today. The part that you cannot measure is the improvement on the part of those guys that didn't play today. Let's face it, they had a chance to improve their fundamentals over the last 3 weeks, and I have to believe that was accomplished. And that's true not just for O-line, but all positions on both sides of the ball. So I got to believe that the bowl workouts have helped with our development of players, especially that you don't see much during the game. And maybe you're disappointed more for the performance you saw today in comparison to the performance you saw against Nebraska. Did we make progress or not? I can see where you're not sure that we made any progress. That would be logical that you might think that way.
Ryan?
Yeah, I hear you, Corey, but I didn't hear Don's final part. But I got the gist of his message, and that's fine. I didn't know precisely, you know, like if the lineup that Iowa had today was completely knew how many young guys. I was a little disappointed that Carson didn't get a shot at quarterback. I mean, they were, you know, when they put Laporta in there, you know, that was fine. I mean, you know, whatever they want to do. I thought they would run more of a wildcat type formation with that, and they didn't really. I mean, they had him driving right up the middle or whatever, and I was surprised by that. But I was really disappointed that Carson didn't get any playing time, I guess. Thought he deserved some.
I thought that was not a real serious play call with Laporta, quite frankly, Don. I don't know.
Well, the announcers they even asked the question out loud, do you think Kentucky has a right to be offended by Iowa playing Laporta as a Wildcat quarterback? They asked that question.
And I said earlier in the week, Cooper DeJean was the emergency quarterback today. So had both guys went down, Cooper was going to be the third guy in. But the fact that you'd rather run Sam Laporta in that situation, I think it was like I say, I don't think it was a serious play call, frankly. But if we're going to be serious, then and why not be serious, right?
Right.
Maybe try something like Cooper DeJean at quarterback. I mean, he like I say, he I can tell you on a good authority, he was the emergency quarterback. So why not run him in that situation? Whatever. There were other things that Brian could have done with Joe too that we can discuss. But good points,
right.
Ryan.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I just didn't know enough about. I mean, there was so much messing around with the roster prior to this game and who was available and who was eligible and who wasn't, and I really didn't think they were going to have as much continuity really as a squad on offense today as they did. Actually, they surprised me. I thought they overperformed, coming out of the gate. I thought they were ready to go. I was really optimistic that maybe Brian had really come up with a really good game plan, and was hopeful that, they would be able to carry that out. I was disappointed that they didn't again, do the deep threat very often. They did it a couple of times. He overthrew it one time. The other ball was just didn't have a chance. But I thought Labus played pretty well, and there were some battered balls that were like, real rookie mistakes. But other than that, I mean, I thought he played pretty well for his first time out. So anyway, that was all I had done. I want to thank you guys for doing a great job this year. It's been more entertaining, I think, listening to you guys than it's been watching the team. I kind of get more entertainment out of this than I do the game. But at any rate, it's been very enjoyable. I wish you both a happy New Year. And Don, I was thinking about you when I watched the Army-Navy game. So there you go. You guys have a good one.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we are about an hour in, and we got about an hour to go here. We're going to be here until about 4:30 p.m. Central Time, talking Iowa, Kentucky, and I'm fine with addressing the future. And anybody who says enjoy the win, well, last game of the season, Don, and I mean these are all valid subjects. So to our phone line, to our phone caller, we're going to put you on hold. We will be right back with everybody. We're going to take a quick break. And yes, we're going to talk about this stat too. 0 for 13 on 3rd and 4th down. I still can't believe that number. But again, the Hawkeyes get the shutout victory today over the Kentucky Wildcats. We'll be back after a quick message from our sponsor. You're watching Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Welcome to Iowa Floor Covering, a locally owned flooring store in Bondurant, Iowa that specializes in do-it-yourself projects. If you're a contractor or a DIYer, Iowa Floor Covering has your back. Right now at Iowa Floor Covering, get tough core click-together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring for $269 per foot when you install it yourself. That's a much better value than you'll find at any of the big box stores. Looking for other types of flooring? They can help with that too. Between their exceptional product knowledge and commitment to customer service, the guys at Iowa Floor Covering will provide everything you need to complete your DIY flooring project. So what are you waiting for? Skip the box stores now and visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. That's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. Promotional pricing only available with self-installation. Alrighty, we are back here. Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Again, the Hawkeyes defeating the Kentucky Wildcats on this Saturday, 21-0, one day before the calendar flips to 2023 officially. And of course, the playoff game is just getting underway, so we're going to be here for about another hour, and then we're going to let everybody loose. And I know, Don, you want to watch Michigan, TCU, and of course, Ohio State, Georgia, which should be entertaining games. Chance for the Big Ten to finally win a national title. They got 2 in the playoff this year, so we'll look forward to that here later this afternoon. All right, let's try Ryan again. Ryan, are you with us?
Can you hear me, guys?
I can hear you loud and clear, sir.
Okay, thank you very much for getting me back on. First of all, I have some positive comments about the game and some questions, but first of all, I just want to wish you both a happy new year. Coach Patterson, thank you so much for sticking with us all year. I hope you're back next year. You teach us football. Your insight is just second to none. So I just want to especially thank you as well. Question, because I do have a New Year's wish. In your years of offensive coordinator at Iowa, have you ever had 206 yards offense and 0 for, I believe, 9 for third down and 26 or 7% on the year for third down conversion? I can't hear you, Coach.
Okay. Corey, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yep.
Okay. I think I know what your question was. Have you ever had a game with 206 yards offense? Is that right? Is that one of the questions?
Or somewhere in there, yeah.
I can't remember that. Maybe there was, but I certainly can't remember it. I don't doubt that somebody gave us bad numbers here and there, but I think it's safe to say that our numbers in general were a lot better than what we see nowadays. That's true.
So I agree, because I watched every single game where you were I watched every game before you were offensive coordinator. So my New Year's wish, 72 or not, you're a very, very sharp individual. You know your football. I think the University of Iowa needs to back up a Brinks truck to your driveway and bring you on board. I think we would all be much, much happier with that result. RMD or not, you're still an excellent offensive coach, and I would love to see that happen. Although I think you're probably happy in retirement.
I'm happy in retirement.
Dang.
One reason I'm happy, though, is I have a chance to do this show because it's a way for me to stay connected with football.
Yeah, dang it. Anyway, just thought I might twist your arm.
Well, just so, Ryan, if he became the OC next year and Brian gets canned and Don's the OC, does that mean we have Brian on the show? But listen, for the record, I think Brian would be really good on a show like this, Don. I really do. In all seriousness, I think he knows football. I mean, I've never doubted his acumen as it relates to knowing the game. There's a difference being a successful coach. There's a lot involved in being a college football coach, as you well know. I think Brian would be good in this setting. Anyways, Ryan,
maybe you'd get Chuck Long or one of those guys.
Chuck would be good too.
So anyway, let's talk about the good. I remember after like game 3 or 4, I said I'm worried about Cooper DeJean leaving after next year. I know I was told to pump the brakes, understandably, and yet I'm more worried about Cooper being gone after next year. That guy is a star. He is. With all due respect to Jack Campbell, who's got the awards, and as far as I'm concerned, our linebacker discussion is Jack Campbell and Larry Station, period. Like, they're the elite two, the benchmarks. With no disrespect to the long line of great linebackers we've had. In the Nebraska game, if Cooper doesn't go down in 2-3 minutes into the game, they don't get the 3 touchdowns that were against TJ Hall and Jamison Heinz.
Right.
Cooper is, I believe, the MVP of this team. He's just absolutely beyond phenomenal. And yes, I do think we better have some people ready to go after next year because he won't be here much longer. And then the other thought I had was run blocking. It was pretty bad today. I really hope Trevor Locke, I think his name is ready to go. Apparently there's an Alabama guy that isn't coming now, and no word out of the portal of anybody that we've heard. So
I mean, they're in on guys. I'd be surprised if they don't bring in a guy from the portal. They're in on guys right now. I don't know any specifically, but I know, they're looking. There's no question they're looking. I know Tyler Barnes has followed some different linemen on Twitter in the portal. I mean, he's not doing that just to mess with fans. I mean, I think they're probably going to take one or two. Brian would be my guess. There's a lot of good linemen out there, guys with experience.
If you're an offensive lineman, this has to be a very attractive opportunity. Because, I mean, Caleb is really good. One thought I had, though, and I know you guys kind of touched upon it, but I thought it was kind of stupid, frankly. Number one, that a guy coming off meniscus surgery is playing the Wildcat when Cooper DeJean would have been a perfect opportunity to play that role.
That's a fair point.
I mean, here's a guy who's going to be probably a third-round pick if you believe the mock drafts in the NFL draft, and coming off meniscus surgery, and you're playing him at quarterback, running him twice. I did not understand that for the life of me. I know we heard rumors, and apparently it wasn't even a rumor. It was a fact that he was practicing some of those plays in practice, and it made no sense at all to me whatsoever. Laporta.
I was told by a reliable source that was simply to mess with the media. Now they ran him. They did give him a play today, and
3.
Again, it wasn't a. Did they give him? No, they didn't give him.
Yes, they did. He ran it twice for 6 yards.
Yeah.
Not when the game was.
One was a handoff to Caleb Johnson, and he ran one for 6, and then ran another for no gain.
Okay, but not when the game was in doubt. All right.
Correct.
So, I'm just saying those weren't serious play calls, and I think it sounds like I was told that Y.A. Black took a couple quarterback snaps in practice as well. It wasn't a serious thing. In fact, if you go back, Don, I know you watch it. You watched Phil Parker and Brian Ferentz talk yesterday. Did you watch that whole press conference?
I've seen part of it, but not all of it.
Okay, because Brian was asked specifically about Sam Laporta as a quarterback, as an emergency quarterback, which again, reality is he was not the emergency quarterback in this game, but he had taken snaps in practice. You could tell Phil Parker would not be good at poker, because as soon as the question was out there, he was holding back laughter. Like, go back and watch that interview yesterday. He had the biggest smile on his face when the question was asked. So I don't quite understand why you run it at all, but it was not when the game was in doubt. And the meniscus thing. I mean, heck, for Sam Laporta to break 7 tackles on that one play, fresh off a meniscus surgery, I would say that's impressive.
Maybe he's fine, but I still think
I'm just grateful he wasn't injured. I'm grateful he wasn't injured when he was a Wildcat quarterback. Then we would have looked foolish.
No,
it's a big risk to take, but
especially when he's going into the draft. Like he's headed to the draft here. So yeah,
I guess my last comment is, when you're 26% third down completions on the year, and you're hearing things like, look, I like Kirk. I will always think fondly of him when he hangs it up. But at the end of the day, sometimes he says really asinine things like, we're not broken. Well, when you're 130 out of 131 with these kind of conversion rates, and then not only you say it's not broken, but then you're saying, hey, we're just messing with the media, if that's true. Well, when you're 130 out of 131, I would hope 100% of your practice reps are serious, because they need to be.
Yeah. Well, I was told, just for the record, because I had the same response, and the person that I spoke with, who again was there and knows what happened, this individual told me that there were very few snaps. It was just it was a few minutes. So I get what you're saying, because I had the same reaction. Are we really wasting time to try to fool the media? The guys are going to have I think it was more of just to give guys like Laporta and Black, let them have a good time here for a few minutes, and keep the media kind of guessing. I don't think it probably fooled everybody in the media either, for the record, but that's what I was told. It could be. I guess it's possible it's inaccurate information, but it was a reliable source.
Well, the last comment I have is, Coach, if you do find a Brinks truck for some reason in your driveway, please don't shoo him away.
I'll promise you, Ryan, I won't shoo them away.
Thank you, Coach. Now I got some hope.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the call, sir.
Thank you very much, guys. Happy New Year. And Coach, thanks again for all your time this year, and you've been wonderful.
Thank you, Ryan, for your kind words.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. I want to take a moment here to remind everybody, if you're interested in becoming a premium subscriber, you can do so by clicking the join button next to From the Hawkeye of the Storm. If you're on an iPhone, you may have to log in on a desktop when the show's over. That's fine. Click the join button and you're supporting the show. You'll get some perks, some early video releases. And, of course, you'll also be supporting the work being done here From the Hawkeye of the Storm. And speaking of becoming a premium subscriber, Coil Stipulate. Thank you, Coil Stipulate, for becoming our most recent premium member here From the Hawkeye of the Storm. Again, follow Coy Stipulate's example here and becoming a member to support this channel. Pugmaster, appreciate the super sticker from Pugmaster, regular chatter, supporter, listener here From the Hawkeye of the Storm. And one more thing before we move on to our next caller. If you are not following the show on Instagram, please head over to Instagram and do that real quick. Click the follow button and follow us at From the Hawkeye, at From the Hawkeye on Instagram, same as our Twitter handle, at From the Hawkeye. And, of course, our Facebook page needs some work, too. Maybe that's an off-season project that I can undertake. But a lot of work's been put into the Instagram page, so please consider supporting the channel, following it. And we have some exclusive content on the Instagram page, so consider following From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Instagram. And, of course, share the show out on social media in general. That always helps when you do that. All right, let's get to our caller who's been on hold. Thank you for calling From the Hawkeye of the Storm, Iowa postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Who's on the line?
Lomansky, Corey, Happy New Year to you and Coach.
Thank you, Lomansky. How you doing up in the great state of Wisconsin?
Well, I rather be sitting in Iowa City, but you got to accept certain things in life. The chat is so intelligent and so sharp, but they fail to realize if you want to get to Don Patterson, if you want to get to him and call a good defensive play against him, you gotta email Corey to get to Mrs. Patterson, and then Mrs. Patterson we know is coach to coach. So if we want a cowboy hat on him, or if we want him to be offensive coordinator, or if we just simply want him to come back next year, Coach, we will get to Mrs. Patterson because we know where all the power lies.
I know Mrs. Patterson, and is there some truth in that comment, Don?
Yeah, that's a pretty good rationale.
You're the only Texan who refuses to wear a cowboy hat, and I know that deep down that's not you. It's somebody in behind the scenes that knows your public style. What would be the best public style for you, Coach?
Well, I was born in north central Texas, and unless you're west of Fort Worth, you're really not much of a cowboy type of guy. You know, if you're west of Fort Worth, you probably do have a good pair of cowboy boots, but otherwise, probably not.
I like both your opinions. And maybe this is not the smartest question in the world, but we couldn't get our third string quarterback on the field. You know, didn't Hayden used to say this, and maybe Don, you said if you coach long enough, you'll see everything. We couldn't get our second string or third string quarterback on a football field. God bless America. We got both of them on the field, boys. Hard to believe, isn't it?
Well, I would have liked to have seen Carson May today, too. We had a chance to put him in late and didn't. But whatever. I guess I shouldn't expect him to get to play. If Labus hadn't had a snap all year, I don't know what would make me think that Carson May would get one today.
I agree. That honestly, and I know some people are going to say, well, you're always critical. You're never happy. That's fine. It makes sense to have played Carson a few snaps, Don, because if you're debuting, if you're auditioning these guys for potentially a role next year, whether that be as a starter or with Cade coming in as a backup, wouldn't you like to see Carson in a real game that doesn't really have huge implications when you're up 21-0? I mean, again.
Well, yes, let me give you an example, Corey, that is a takeoff on what you just asked, the question you just asked. Think back. Imagine you're a Kentucky fan today. I know this much. I felt sorry for Dustin Wade. I was hoping they were going to pull him sooner because he was clearly in over his head. I mean, how many mistakes can you afford to make? Throwing a little bit late to the flat is one thing. He threw so late to the flat that Cooper from off coverage had no problem getting in the throwing lane. It was easy for him to do it. That ball was unbelievably late. That looks like something a high school quarterback would do. At that point, I would have yanked him right then. We're already down 21-0. He's already proven he can't make good decisions. Get him out.
Agree.
But here's the reality, and I don't believe he came in until about 5 minutes left. I think I made a note. 6 minutes left. Deuce Hogan finally in the game. 5:53 on the clock. You know who looked pretty good throwing the ball? If you're a Kentucky fan, Deuce Hogan did. He looked better than the other guy.
I agree. And I didn't think the play calling was great for Deuce there at the end, but you're right. And maybe we shouldn't read too much into depth charts because we know we've learned here this year with Kirk that you can't read too much into these depth charts, Don. But the depth chart indicated that there were 3 guys that had a chance to play on Saturday. And you're right. I mean, how long of a leash does a guy like Destin Wade have? Has he built up some long leash? I mean, why not go to one of the other 2 guys?
And this is after Kentucky said, we're going to play all 3 quarterbacks. They said that.
A little strange there. Yeah. And Destin, for the record, Don, Destin got to a point in this game. There was one play where he dropped back and the pocket was, I thought the offensive line blocked decently well in the play. And within a second, he had decided, I'm taking off. And to me, that was an indication right there, Don, that it's in his head. You may need to make it. Did you saw what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Get him out for his own good.
Yeah. Lomansky?
Don, I watched you make offensive calls for many years. I couldn't help but think of you when we ran Wildcat, how many options there could have been with different players. I myself would put Cooper DeJean maybe one series, but more likely bringing him on critical situations, 4th and 3. You know, they don't know who's a quarterback. In your opinion, and Corey, take a shot at it too. Give me 2 or 3 players. No disregards to Sam, but give me 2 or 3 players that you would put in a shotgun, like Don, you said all year long. Give people a package. Give people experience. Everybody on that field today. Aaron Graves is a natural ahead of his time, but give me somebody at QB today that you would have, either one of you guys would have put it in it at I'll call it Wildcat.
Well, I mean, again, I've said it all year. Cooper is the obvious answer. I mean, if you're going to run, and for the people out there, Don, who say, well, you're not going to run one of your best players. Well, we ran Sam Laporta. So, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe that's a line of reasoning. And for people that say, why would Iowa run Wildcat? Don, they were running Wildcat 2 years ago. They ran Wildcat.
Right.
I don't think they ran it very well, partially because they weren't a threat to throw out of the Wildcat. But Cooper DeJean is a former quarterback. So, that would be my one thing. I mean, I wasn't sitting here complaining about that during the game, Lomansky, but if you're going to run Wildcat and do something different and fun and exciting and potentially explosive, do something like that. I running Sam Laporta, there's very little. Don, is there as great much as I like Sam Laporta, even his ability to make yards after contact, yards after catch, is he really a strong threat as a Wildcat QB? I mean, come on.
I wouldn't say so. Let's face it, Sam's good after the catch, but after the catch, he's not sitting in the backfield either as he is as a Wildcat quarterback. It requires a little bit of indoctrination as far as how to run between the tackles. Sam is so effective out in space because he's making the first guy miss and he's getting vertical with his running and breaking tackles along the way. That's what Sam's good at. Let's face it, Cooper would be a lot more comfortable in a Wildcat position because it's probably very similar to what he did in high school.
Exactly. Anything else, Lomansky?
I can't leave the show. My last this year in 2022 is to shout out to the great Iowa football programs. We got Duggan on national TV ahead of 14-0 ahead of Michigan right now. And a shout out to Iowa Wesleyan College, to the great late Mississippi State College coach. And I can't help but let Don or even Corey comment on the late Mississippi State coach that called plays at Iowa Wesleyan. And I thought he was great for college football. I'll hang up and listen to the rest of the show. And guys, please come back to 2023. You're a big part of my social life.
Thanks, Lomansky. We appreciate you being here. All right. Let's
Can I make one comment about Leach?
Yep, let me just put our next caller on hold here.
Okay.
Caller on hold. Go ahead, Don. Just your thoughts on Mike Leach.
Well, one thing I think the measure of greatness for a coach, some people would argue, simply ties into what kind of coaching tree he's developed through the years. And we're proud of Coach Fry's coaching tree. And of course, Bear Bryant with Alabama, of course, had a great coaching tree. A lot of people would argue that Coach Fry's is just as good or better. But let's give Mike Leach credit. He also had a good coaching tree. He was able to hire some good young coaches. They learned from him. That made them more marketable, and that gave them a chance to have success as a head coach. And a number of guys have done that. So that's just one more effect that Mike Leach has had on the game of football. There are other coaches out there that are Mike Leach's disciples that are doing a good job of moving the football.
And for the record, apparently TCU's up 14-0. Shane wants to know if Iowa offered Duggan. You have some insight on that situation, correct, Don?
Yes, I do. Iowa did offer Max Duggan, but I think Max Duggan understood at the time, you've offered me, and yet I'm not at the top of your list. I think that's how he felt. And of course, I'm used to that in recruiting. Oftentimes you'll offer a guy, but he's not the guy you really want to commit. You offer him, but he's on hold, if you will, because you're hoping to get someone else. I think Max Duggan sensed that at that time and decided that maybe I'm higher on TCU's list than I am on Iowa's list. So no hard feelings. I'll go to TCU. And incidentally, Max Duggan was a high school senior at the same time as Alex Padilla. So it sounds to me like we probably favored Alex over Max. I don't know that for a fact. I haven't talked to the coaches about it, but I do know that Max was offered by Iowa, and yet he didn't feel that he was really desperately wanted by Iowa. I think that's the perception that he had.
All right, let's get to our next caller. Randy, welcome to the
Hey,
show.
how we doing?
Good. How are you, sir?
Oh, doing all right. It's good to get some payback.
Absolutely. Good
Same.
win. 21-0. You really, like we said at the outset, shutouts are hard to come by, and give credit to Phil Parker. It's an incredible unit, and good to see the young guys inspire confidence for future generations here.
Yeah, I noticed that when I was checking Twitter during the first part of the game after X's interception and return for a touchdown, that some people were saying, so why wasn't he playing earlier in the season? If you didn't notice, Castro was playing pretty good, and Merriweather was all first team All-American.
As was Schulte.
Yeah. As what?
Schulte played very well all year.
Yeah, Schulte played good too. So, I mean, he's got to learn. He's got to ease himself into it, and it sounds like he had a really good bowl prep. I would never doubt anything this defensive coaching staff decides to do as far as personnel. It's on the other side of the ball. I kind of have a tendency to second guess things a little bit more, unless it's maybe tight end or something like that. But I mean, it's pretty rough on that side of the ball. What they choose to run from an offensive play calling standpoint, having guys only get one reception. Ragaini, he had one reception today. Vines,
I believe two, as I recall.
Okay.
One throw up that left sideline was a good throw by Joey Labus, by the way, Don. Maybe his best throw of the day.
It was a good throw. It was an even better catch.
Yeah.
How many did Vines have? I know he had at least one.
Yeah, he had a couple carries as well. I actually have the box score, the official box score in front of me. Sam Laporta ended the day with 5 catches for 56 yards. Ironically enough, 52 yards after yards after the catch for Sam. So that, again, tells you what he did on that long of 27. Luke Lachey, 3 catches for 36 yards. Deontay Vines, almost said Divine. That's a good nickname for him. 2 catches for 23 yards. And Ragaini, hey, I said it right this time, Randy. 2 catches for 21 yards. So let's see, that's 4 catches for 44 yards to our wide receivers. So that first catch that Laporta had he put on some good moves. Oh, man.
After the catch, it looked a little bit Kittle-esque.
I was going to say it looked Hawkinson-esque, but you're right. Kittle's a great one, too. Both those guys are great. Don, we do a good job. I'll give Brian Ferentz credit for this, and I think he deserves some credit for that because he's been around during the years of Hawkinson, Fant, Kittle. I don't know where he was coaching. What position? Was he coaching tight ends when Kittle was here? Do you remember, Don, back in
Who?
15? Brian. 15,
Brian,
16.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, our offensive staff does a nice job.
I think LeVar Woods was.
Well, let's not forget, George didn't have great numbers when he played at Iowa, in part because of injuries, but you could also argue that he was underutilized.
But our guys, one of my point is our tight ends they understand yards after contact.
Yeah.
And they, you just love watching Kittle in the league throwing guys off of him, and that's kind of what Laporta was doing there for a while today.
I still remember this, and I've told this story. I saw the very first scrimmage that Sam had as an Iowa football player. It was during camp, and it was young guys versus young guys. And after the scrimmage, I only talked to one freshman. It was Sam Laporta. And I said, Sam, I want to introduce myself. I used to coach tight ends here, and I just want to congratulate you. You're the only guy I'm going to talk to today in terms of congratulating them for how they scrimmaged. And I'll tell you why, because you think you're Mike Ditka. You're out there running over people. And I don't even know for sure that he knew who Mike Ditka was, but that was the guy that came to mind for me. But Sam demonstrated even then. And I told him, I said, Sam, I coached a great tight end at Iowa that also wore number 84. And he said, I know who it is, Coach. It's Marv Cook. And I said, yes, you're right. But just so you know, if you keep your head on straight and you keep doing what you are capable of doing, you're going to play on Sunday also. And he said, Coach, that's my goal. And he's on the verge of getting that done now because he's certainly going to have a chance to do so.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for all you guys do.
Thank you, Randy.
Have a happy new year.
You be a big part of the show as well. Thank you, sir.
All right.
A couple things. So, I'm hearing. I'm obviously not on. I'm not on Twitter as we're talking here. So I said a couple weeks ago that I'd been told that Tory Taylor was coming back. I've seen multiple people in the chat say that he just announced that on Twitter. So that doesn't surprise me. I know one of our callers earlier expressed doubt on that because of how he played today. Let me see if I can pull up Tory Taylor's Twitter account here. I don't see anything from Tory on Twitter, but that's multiple people have said that's been announced, Don, which is, again, not surprising to me. But your thoughts on Tory coming back next year? Good for him.
He's a weapon. That's for sure. He's a weapon, and I'm glad he's on our side. Let's face it. Honestly, if you had to assess who won the kicking game, my guess is out of 13 games played now, we would have won the kicking game at least 10 of those 13, maybe as many as 11 or 12 of those 13 games. I do recall we had an edge on field position in most of those games. The team that won on field position in our 9 games, 9 conference games, won the game every time. The one thing we know for sure, we went on field position today by a landslide, and that had everything to do with the outcome of the game. Here's a sobering thought, Corey. Imagine for a second we don't have the 2 pick sixes on our side. Assuming those plays never happened, what would have been the score going into the fourth quarter? Would it have been 7-0? I suspect it might have been.
Yes. But listen, that's the difference between a lot of these games this year, Don. The difference between scores like the South Dakota State game and scores like this game, 21-0. I mean, there's a fine line when you have 2 pick sixes for your defense on just terrible throws. You give the Iowa DBs credit for making the plays, but terrible throws. We've talked about that. Real quickly, couple other things. I can confirm this. Seth Anderson, Iowa wide receiver target Seth Anderson, has officially closed his recruitment per his Twitter. And reportedly, his two reported offers out of the Power 5 are Iowa and Georgia Tech. He visited Iowa not that long ago. He was he's two-time Big South Freshman of the Week, Big South Offensive Player of the Year, Jerry Rice Freshman of the Year finalist, second-team All-Conference. Ended this past season in the FCS for Charleston Southern with 42 catches for 628, 7 touchdowns. His dad was an NFL wide receiver. They've been in on him hard, got him up to campus when it was really cold. Will be interesting to see. I was told he was potentially visiting Kansas here early January. I would assume, not to speak for Seth Anderson, but I would assume this means that Seth Anderson is skipping his visit to Kansas, and I don't believe Kansas had offered. One more thing that we should get to here, and again, this is just I'm trusting people in the chat here, but according to a couple people, Ray included, he says that Jack Campbell announced that his grandfather passed away last night in an accident. Sad news, prayers for Jack and his family. I did not hear that, but if that's the case, yeah, I mean, just shocking and tragic for Jack and his Campbell, and certainly Jack and his family. Certainly thoughts and prayers to him and his group. Don, just thoughts on, assuming this is true. I mean, how hard is that to go out? And I'm sure you've had guys come back. LaShawn Williams, remember he lost his father earlier this season and came back and played, but the next day for Jack Campbell to come back and play the next day, certainly wearing his heart on his shoulders, so to speak.
Yes, I don't know when Jack found out. Or do you think he found out yesterday that his grandfather had passed away?
Sounds like it was last night. So
last night.
Late last night.
I'm sure Jack simply probably asked himself, what would my grandfather want me to do? Would he want me to play in this? And I'm sure the answer must have been yes. And that's not hard for me to imagine. I think most players I coached, if they lost a lot, they would typically play in that next game, assuming it didn't conflict with funeral services. They would play and simply dedicate that game to that lost loved one. And I'm sure Jack did that today. He certainly played his usual great game.
Kyle in our private chat says that Sam Laporta found this out after the game.
Wow.
This is what am I right on that, Kyle? Give me a nod if that's correct. He's saying that's accurate information. So thoughts and prayers to Jack and his family. Bittersweet, and obviously there's a lot of things out there, Don, bigger than football, bigger than the game, and absolutely condolences to Jack and his family. DC Hawkeye, appreciate the super chat, DC Hawkeye. As we have all said, the announcer stated to imagine how good Iowa would have been this year with even an okay offense. Coach Patterson, thank you for gracing us with your presence on this cast. You are awesome. And I would echo that, Don.
Thank you, DC Hawkeye. And I do recall you were aware of the Army-Navy connection too, because we had a group experience at the Army-Navy game.
Absolutely. Thank you, DC Hawkeye. And Uncle Rico, Don and Corey, please use this donation to buy a plate of peach cobbler with a side of upside at Cracker Barrel, Don.
What is upside?
Exactly.
I'm not sure what that is.
Oh, neither is Brian. Brian's not sure either, Don. So let's go to this super chat from Uncle Rico. He says he started a GoFundMe page for Coach Patterson as Iowa's new OC. Here's the first $5. Thank you, Uncle Rico. All right. And let's see. I know I'm behind in a couple things. We've got Kyle on hold. We got a caller on our phone line. We'll get to Kyle first, and we'll go to our phone line. Kyle, welcome to the show, sir.
How you doing, guys?
Doing all right. How are you, Kyle?
Well, it was I would say the second half was a snooze fest for any non-Iowa fans, but I thought it was an interesting chance to see some of the young guys, as we talked about before the game. First player that really stood out for me was, I know everybody's talking about him, but Xavier Wampa. Every Iowa DB that comes in and plays from the start seems like they're a machine of instincts and knowing where to be at the right time. And he looks like another product of that, plus 5-star athleticism. What did you see anything, Don, beyond the stuff that was just obvious today about what made you excited for him for next year?
Well, I think it's safe to say all of our defensive backs are very well coached. And part of being well coached, of course, is having the mindset that you will be coachable. Obviously, Coach Parker has so much credibility with them. They're listening and hanging on every word. If they are something by Coach Parker, they take it as gospel because they know it's the voice of experience, the voice of reason. Do it as Coach Parker says to do it because that's the right way to get it done. And you see that time and again. Today was a great example. I think probably both the DBs would say those are routine plays. Those are plays we should make, but they still have to make them. And it was a thing of beauty, and those guys understand. And of course, you can think back to some of Cooper's interceptions this season where he did run through half the team to get to the end zone. Can't recall who that was against, Corey, but I remember it was an early season game, and he had any number of guys that might have tackled him, except they couldn't get it done. And today, Xavier proved all over again that he's very dangerous with the ball under his arm too. So it's fun to see. And that's what defensive players understand. They're not just assuming that they're going to be tackled. They're not going to run out of bounds with the ball. Are you kidding? There are a lot of those guys out there playing offense that can't tackle me. That's the joke about the linemen, of course, is they're not in position to tackle a skilled athlete like either one of those two. So logically, don't go out of bounds. Stay on the field. Let's see if you can weave your way through the offense because those guys don't spend much time learning how to tackle.
And it was even especially at Iowa too, because like we saw Terry Roberts in the Iowa State game that had the interception, and then he got tackled after about 5-10 yards, and he slams the ball on the ground because he knows like with the lineman on the field, they can't tackle.
Lost his balance, didn't he?
Yeah, he didn't get tackled. He just lost his balance and fell.
Oh. Yeah, and he was beyond frustrated because he's like, man, this might be our best chance to score.
Yeah, he thought looking back, I should have been able to stay on my feet.
Yeah. What so the third downs and the fourth downs were really, really frustrating. What, like, as far as execution and play calling, how much of it do you think is play calling? And then how much of the third downs today were execution of the play that was called?
Oh, it's a little bit of both, I guess. I haven't gone back and looked at each of those critical downs to see what might have been. Here's an example that comes to mind for me. 3rd and 5, a zone read by Labus. You might remember the play. A zone read for 4, but he slid, and he was a yard short. And Corey, you've heard me say before, if it's a critical down, don't slide unless you know for sure you've got your first down.
Because the official is spotting you at when you gave yourself up. Correct.
That's right.
Did you think that was a good spot, Corey?
I did because he started sliding prior to the first down.
Yeah, for the reason you just stated, Corey. That's what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So don't slide unless you know for sure you've gotten the first down yardage. Don't run out of bounds unless you know for sure you've gotten the first down yardage. You've always heard me say that. Critical downs, you gotta go get it. And if it's going to be close, then you have to be a running back. You have to get your pads down and fight for the first down yardage. So that's one that got away. That's one that could have been converted. There were others. Some of those failures, I'd say, we're protecting the lead. We're running another safe play. A couple come to mind. We threw the ball way short of the first down marker. That's a pet peeve I know of yours, Corey, and you're right. A 3rd and 7, a ball thrown 1 yard downfield, and that pass was broken up. It was a drag route across the formation. I believe it was to Deontay, as I recall. And he was hit as soon as the ball got there. He was hit and the ball came out. I guess I can't read. I'm almost certain it was Deontay. That's one that got away. There were others, but the bottom line, the reason we're not very good in critical downs in general, if it's short yardage, because we're not a dominant run blocking front, it's not easy for us to get the necessary yardage. And obviously, if it's long yardage, we're not that skilled at pass protection. We're not that skilled at separating from the defenders. Consequently, we struggle to get that necessary yardage on 3rd and long. That combination of pass pro issues and then you got to find a way to get open too, of course, and then have an accurate throw. That's a given, but sometimes that's not easy to do either based on the pressure that the pass rush is put on you. Incidentally, got to give a lot of credit to our pass rush. You know, they really didn't solve our pressure. You know, you saw a lot of what we call cross dogs. You know, the linebackers were running different pass into the backfield. And oftentimes that's when we got our sacks, were those cross dogs. And typically it seemed like Jack was the trailer, but he showed up in the backfield pretty late. A lot of people would argue those are coverage sacks because obviously the quarterback had to hold the ball for a while for Jack to get home. And credit to the guys downfield that are doing a good job of hanging with those receivers. The quarterback, he's an inexperienced quarterback. He didn't feel comfortable. He's just not very skilled yet at finding open receivers. And that's where you've heard me talk about pre-snap reads. That's why it's so important to get an idea before the snap of what the coverage is. And then you have a better idea of where the open receiver is going to be.
Another thing, too, about that first drive, Corey, was I thought I agreed with you that the play calling got like less aggressive after that first drive. But I think there's been a few times I haven't watched tons of other teams, but sometimes I've watched other teams with struggling offenses. And it feels like that first drive is something that they've like scripted and practiced the week before, where they have like 10 plays that they're just going to go to because they practiced them all week. And that's just predetermined. And then after that, like they're not good offenses, so they don't have a ton of other things to go to.
Perfect example. And I know we're slightly going off subject, but go back to the Big Ten championship game last year. I believe it was the first offensive drive. of the game, and they go halfback pass. That was scripted, and you're thinking, wow, we're breaking tendency, and how about that for a start? Never went back to, didn't have any other exotics planned. That's you talked about not having enough plays, Don. I know we're not just talking about exotics, but that's a perfect example. I think if there was as much work put into the game plan as a whole as there is to what Kyle just alluded to, maybe first drive offense, perhaps you have better results. Is that a thing, or is it more so, you have a first drive planned out, orchestrated to a T, and then you kind of let the flow of the game come to you? How would you balance that?
I don't doubt that a lot of our first calls on that first possession were plays that we were planning on running on that first possession in the game. Let's face it, the first two snaps were both variations of naked. And the third snap was the misdirection Y screen. Those are plays that we kept going back to that did give us pretty good success, except the more they saw them, the better they defended them, of course.
Yeah, and they did. I don't know if this counts right either, but 6 total touches for the wide receivers. That was what the wide receivers had. 4 catches, and then were there 2 wide receiver run plays?
I believe there were 7 targets for the wideouts, as I recall, because it was exactly half as many targets as the tight ends. Tight ends had 14 targets, caught 8. Receivers had 8 targets. 7 targets, caught 4. Isn't that correct, Corey?
I'm looking here. Hold on a second. I don't mean to change the subject. I just got a release from the University of Iowa on Jack Campbell's grandfather. So let me. Do you mind if I read this and come back to it, Don?
Sure,
can I read this release real quick, just so I can get to it, and then we can go back to the box score. Grandfather of Iowa student athlete passes. The grandfather of Iowa football player Jack Campbell passed away late Friday evening following a vehicle pedestrian accident. William Smith Jr., age 76, of Waterloo, Iowa, was the victim of the incident, which involved one vehicle. Smith was transported to Vanderbilt Medical Center, where he was pronounced deceased. Our hearts are with Jack and his entire family as they grieve the tragic death of their grandfather and father. William Smith Jr. said head coach Kirk Ferentz, "We know Mr. Smith was a strong influence on his grandson and a faithful Hawkeye football supporter. All of us players, coaches, and staff members will keep the Campbell family in our thoughts and prayers during this profoundly difficult time." Jack's parents told him about his grandfather's passing after the Music Bowl game ended. His parents made the decision to wait to share this devastating news so that Jack would have one last time to play with his Iowa Hawkeye teammates. William Smith is the father of Jen Campbell, Jack's stepmother. So, just unbelievably tragic, and thoughts and prayers out to Jack and the Campbell family. You were asking me about the stats in this game, Don. Let me pull those up here. You're asking me tight end receptions versus wide receiver receptions, correct?
Yeah, I've got them right here, Corey. Tight ends targeted 14 times, 8 catches, 7 apiece, incidentally. Both Sam and Luke had 7 targets. The wideouts targeted 7 times, 4 completions. So the percentage is the same, 4 for 7 versus 8 for 14. And the yardage is pretty much identical too. 44 yards for the wideouts on 7 and 92 yards for the tight ends on 14. So the productivity is very similar, but you have to realize, of course, without all that yak yardage for the tight ends, the efficiency would have been greater for the wide receivers, a little over 6 yards per attempt. So not very many targets. That's still the disappointment I have, is we're not distributing the ball very evenly between tight ends, wideouts, and backs. The backs had 3 targets, 2 of which were caught, but only for a total of 3 yards.
I mean, is it even possible at Iowa to have a functional offense that's top 100 in the country, getting 7 targets a game to wide receivers? Is that even possible?
That's a problem. You're right, because those guys, and most of course, those guys are the ones that are the beneficiaries of explosive plays. Yeah. If it's not done by a running back, then it's more often done by a wide receiver than a running back even. So those are the guys that oftentimes do have single coverage. And if they can beat their man, obviously the results can be really, really significant. So we're not getting much mileage at all out of our wide receivers. It's not all their fault, of course. There's a factor of pass protection in there that's got to be considered. There's also, of course, that matter of the quarterback being accurate with those throws. So those are the kind of reasons that they might not be productive as they'd like.
How do you see that going forward next year, Corey? Do you feel good about Anderson and Tesla, and then the wide receiver room next year as a whole?
The Seth Anderson one, I'm honestly 50-50 right now on that one, because I think
I lost you, Corey.
Can you hear me, Don?
Yeah.
I would say Seth Anderson, I'm 50-50 on right now. I think it's 50-50 Georgia Tech, Iowa. I've been told this way, and then I've been told that way, that he was really happy, really impressed with Iowa. And then he went back home, the plane landed down in Charleston, and that's when Georgia Tech was on the phone and officially offered him a scholarship, full ride scholarship. So I don't know on that one. Certainly I would be surprised if he commits anywhere else, because he hasn't reported any other Power 5 offers. I know he was high on Appalachian State at one time, but logic would tell me that he's probably going to a Power 5 if he has an opportunity. As it relates to Tesla, I mean, the kid just keeps piling in more offers. He's gotten offers from Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Colorado, Miami, Oklahoma State. Just go down the list. He visited Iowa State. That's the one advantage Iowa had. They got in him early, got him on campus early. I was told he was visiting Baylor. I don't know if that's official or not. I feel a lot better about Anderson. They need both of them. I mean, if they get one of them, I'll be happy, but not satisfied, because they lost 2 really good receivers. I don't care what anybody has to say about Bruce and Johnson. They lost 2 really good receivers. So they need both of them. And then you need to develop the guys you have. Great news to have Nico Ragaini back. Don, maybe that'd be a good opportunity, and then we'll let you slide, Kyle. Don, just comment on Ragaini announcing this week, telling the media that he was coming back, which wasn't a surprise, but it was good to hear.
I'm really happy that Nico's back. I think he's going to be a great role model for the younger receivers. He is a savvy player. He does have a good idea of how to play that position. Of course, he's got reliable hands, as evidenced again today. That was a wonderful catch on that seam route. So he's going to give us great leadership next year, no doubt about it, because he's a really solid player. The one thing he lacks, he's not as fast as some guys, of course, that you can find. But the fact that he's a good route runner and got super hands, I think that still makes him very, very valuable to our offense.
Anything else, Kyle?
That's good for me. Appreciate everything you guys do, and especially Don's second level analytics and analysis and stuff. Makes watching the games a lot more interesting when you have a lot of stuff to look for, and just appreciate everything you guys do.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate your help.
Thanks, Kyle.
I want to give a shout out to a few people here. Terry A, and this is going back a few weeks. Terry A, thank you for the donation. Pat O, thank you for the donation. Late November, we haven't had many live shows lately, football wise, so wanted to make sure these people got their proper shout outs. And if I missed you, I apologize. Please let me know, and I'll give you a proper shout out. Tony S., thank you for the donation recently. Michael W. just donated here a few minutes ago. Chad W., Jeremy P., David M., and I'm not giving your last name just for privacy perspective. Those people utilized our donate links, which are Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. You can donate by credit card by means of the PayPal link. So consider doing that, please. It does support the channel and the work being done here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. I want to go through kind of quick fire in the chat, Dom. We got about 10 minutes left before we hit our 2-hour mark, which is what our goal was. So let's go kind of fire here. And then we'll get to our caller who's been on hold patiently. We appreciate that. I just don't want to fall further behind in the chat. Italicus, does Cooper enter the draft next year? Good question, Don. I mean, that's obviously dependent on how his season goes next year. What are his NIL what's his NIL potential here? I mean, that's got to be weighed now with these decisions from athletes. But I would say it's possible he could enter the draft in 2024.
If he were my son, based on what I'd seen so far, I would encourage him to stay in school and come back for a fourth year. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's only in his second year right now. So
Correct.
you're talking about him leaving after 3 years.
Correct.
I think that'd be a mistake, in part just because it's kind of hard to graduate in 3 years. Get your degree, stick around for 2 more years, and odds are, of course, he'll be done with his 4 years of eligibility. I guess I don't know that. Did last year count as a year of a year lost to eligibility? Did he only play in 4 games? Maybe. Is he a redshirt freshman right now, or a true sophomore?
I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
I'll look it up here, Don. Let's get to our next question. I'll come back to this. Weston wants to know, is anybody else concerned that Labus is going to transfer? Well, sure. I said that going into the game. This is an opportunity to not only potentially put some film on tape for other schools, but to potentially audition for the backup job. I don't know that he did enough on tape, Don, to attract major offers from other schools today. So my guess is he's back, but it wouldn't be shocked to see him enter the portal.
Well, I'm trying to figure out the comment here by Weston. I could see if they try to place him as number 3 quarterback. The obvious question is, who's number 2 then? We didn't think enough of
Carson
to put him out there today. So if Labus is not number 2, then who is? Are we talking about another transfer?
Yeah, there have been rumblings that Carson's been really good, but it's just behind on his head knowledge. So I guess you could argue, in the spring we get past spring, but then Joe, you're kind of missing that opportunity to get in the portal for Joe. I would guess what happens is Joe comes back, and then if there's no headway and Carson jumps him heading into next season, he's gone after next year would be my guess.
Probably. It's hard for anybody to have 3 proven quarterbacks.
Yes.
Let's face it, it's difficult to have 2 even, because a guy that's second team at one place is looking at all these options that would give him a chance to be first team somewhere else.
Jason says, is it just me or does Wampa look like Long Neck himself, Merton Hanks?
I think it's just you, Jason. I recruited Merton. Merton's neck is longer than Xavier's, I do believe.
Ryan wants to know, how many plays do we actually run today, Don? Can you have that stat?
24 runs and 24 passes. Is that true? 48 plays? Let me.
Well,
No.
It wouldn't shock me. Would that shock you, Don?
No, it wouldn't. Total plays, 48. 48 plays. Wow. You heard me say one reason we only had 206 yards is because their offense had a chance to be out there to throw a pick six and then go back on the field again. So in that regard, we got cheated out of a couple of possessions, hence the 48 snaps.
Let's get to our caller who's been on hold. Thank you for calling Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson, who's on the line.
Tony S., thank you for the donation.
My name's Lance.
Hey, Lance, can I get you just to turn down your computer real quick?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
You're good.
Okay. I just wanted to say that love your show. Watch it all the time. Best show on YouTube.
Thank you, sir.
My mom passed away, unfortunately, last bowl game when Iowa played Kentucky. And she thought that Spencer had to go. And she was like adamant the whole season And it's sad that I can't get a hold of her anymore because, we would talk periodically throughout the season, and she was like, Spencer this, Spencer that. And so now that we've got a changing of the guard, so to speak, we've got like a Joey, and we got the kid coming in from Michigan. I guess my question to you is that going to help? I mean, is bringing all these new kids in, and it's because you still got no offense. I mean, I love our coach. I love Brian, his son. What he's done in the past. Now, but what they've done and what they built up in the past. But now it seems to me that there needs to be a changing of the guard, and I just think that it needs to come pretty quick. I mean, like, you got all these new pieces that are in place, and it's like, when you got these, it just something needs to change as far as the, the coaching staff. So just wipe it all out. What do you think? I mean, like, that's what I just think that there needs to be, like I said, changing of the guard. So,
well, Lance, first of
my
all,
take,
Lance, I want to first of all express my condolences from Coach Patterson and I, loss of your mother earlier this year. Sincerest condolences to you. And as it relates to
it's
changes,
hard. It's hard for me. I'm sorry. It was hard for me to watch this game. So anyway, thanks.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, Lance. And I would say this: we just lost Don Patterson. As it relates to change, Lance, I've been very clear on where I stand as it relates to change. I do believe that there needs to be a change at OC. I'm not an advocate for firing Kirk by any means.
Right.
But if Kirk's not willing to make the right decision, then someone needs to. And as we've talked about, if you listen to Coach Patterson and I earlier in the show, it's Gary Barta is supposed to be head of the department and supposed to be the ultimate decision maker on Brian because Brian is Kirk's son. So, yeah, I believe that Cade will make a difference. Cade McNamara will make a difference. He's a more accurate passer. He's got better mobility than Spencer Petras. Maybe not quite as good as Joe Labus, but we didn't see a ton of that today from Joey. So I think Cade will make a difference. Eric All will help because you're losing an excellent tight end, your best weapon in Sam Laporta. The run game needs to be better, though. If the offensive line isn't better, play calling's not better.
And you're right. Can I just? I didn't mean to cut you off,
Sure.
but the O line. So I remember back in the day with Brad Banks. So mobility seemed to be was the it was all about mobility. And granted, like Joey, he seemed to have some wheels underneath him, but Brad Banks was pretty mobile. Is that the future for Iowa? I mean, do they need to get somebody that's like a Brad Banks? Do they need to have somebody that when the line, implodes, do they need to have somebody that's, gonna be like a Mike Vick, and just run outside the pocket and make it happen? I mean, that's what they need, something like that. I mean, is that,
I don't think having a mobile quarterback would hurt. You look across the country, not only in college, but in the pros, most guys are mobile now. Even the guys that were bigger bodies. I mean, I think of Josh Allen at Buffalo. That guy is the epitome of being
Lamar
big.
Jackson or Patrick Mahomes. I mean, something like that,
Exactly.
So,
But I do think, I will say this, Marco Linez is a different kind of cat, and he's coming in this next year. He will not be enrolling early, but he'll be here in the summer. He'll be able to learn behind Cade McNamara. He's got the potential to be as close to a Brad Banks as they've had since Brad Banks. So I give Iowa credit for being able to hold on to him. That gives me hope for the future. But in the end, these guys ultimately, especially at the quarterback position, ultimately need coached by somebody who understands the position and understands the pass offense. And I question Brian's ability to do that. So I'm really high on personnel, but my big question revolves around coaching.
So in your opinion, if they decide to have a change of guard who would you recommend in place of Brian Ferentz? Or, if you were to, let's say if Brian Ferentz was to go, who would you recommend for somebody in his place? I'm just
That's
curious.
a good question. I had somebody ask that earlier here a few minutes ago. If I can find the question in the chat, it's been more than a few minutes ago. I don't know where the question is, but I don't know as far as specific candidates. I haven't even gotten that far as it relates to evaluating that because, first things first, you have to commit yourself to change. I mean, Paul Christ's name has been brought up. I don't know that Paul Christ is the fans' choice, but I certainly think if you're going to run a pro-style run-first offense, I would say, a guy who was the head coach at Wisconsin and successful in his own right at Wisconsin would be pretty good if he's focusing exclusively on the offense. He is a former quarterback himself. He would be number one on my list potentially. But again, if you want to change everything, overhaul everything, then we can have a different discussion. But that's not going to happen under Kirk. So, Don, you're back on here.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not asking you to endorse any candidates for the OC job. But if Brian were to move on or whatever, are there any names out there that you have off the top of your head that should be in consideration?
Well, here's a guy that I'm impressed with for how he can call a game because he did it to us, and that would be Mark Whipple. I don't know what his status is with Nebraska. If he's looking for a job,
you're right. That's cool. That's awesome.
That's certainly a guy to consider because.
And then you cut you off, Coach, but that's cool. So that's exactly what I was thinking. So.
I give him a lot of credit. One moment Cooper's injured, and the next moment he's attacking the next corner. So I give him a lot of credit. That was the difference in the game is their best wide receiver attacking our inexperienced corners. That was the difference in the game.
Yep.
Really cool. That's what I was thinking. I didn't say it, thought it, but Coach thought it. So that's really cool. So that's exactly what I was thinking.
Well,
way to go. So cool.
Lance, we appreciate you waiting on hold for so long, and again, condolences for you and your recent loss. And thank you for being a part of the show today.
Thanks so much, you guys. And you guys are great. Go Hawks.
Thank you, sir. Go Hawks. Absolutely. We lost you for a couple minutes there.
Yeah, I apologize. I think I must have hit a button on the computer here that messed me up. I hope I didn't miss too much.
Fast Outdoor Food, you think that Brian can learn to be a good QB's coach and no coordinator. Well, we're not here for I don't believe Iowa is the place to learn. I'll say that. That's how I would sum that up. I'm sure he could learn to do a lot of things. I could learn how to juggle, Don. But guess what? I'm not going to accept a job at the Deli Mart down the road for, if I'm trying to improve my juggling skills. I know that's a bad example, but there is a process here. And when you skip steps, this is what happens, in my opinion. Uncle Rico, thank you for the super chat, sir. Don, do you have a review booth in your house? The level of detail you give analyzing plays is like you were reviewing the play in the booth. Amazing.
Just doing it on my Sony TV. I do have a nice theater that I use to watch games just from a fun standpoint. But if I'm going to study the game, I'll probably just do it on the TV because I can control the remote a little bit better and back the play up a little bit quicker than I can in the home theater. All
right, Don, we promised our listeners 2 hours. We're going to have to go real fast on these final comments. So I'm going to take the phone line, put the phone line down. Coyle Stipulate says, think we might have had a better season with Labus starting the whole season. We could just guess. I mean, it's just total guesswork, Don. But obviously the coaches don't feel that's the case.
Yeah. Well, the smartest thing we did today, the difference in the game, one team did not give their inexperienced quarterback too much rope to hang himself. That would be Iowa. And the other team did. And sure enough, the Kentucky quarterback made glaring mistakes, and that was the difference in the game.
Jason wants to know, why could we not figure out running straight up the middle wasn't working? They finally got to the outside, had some back-to-back good gains.
Don't know what to tell you. We never really had it as a priority to establish our running game. I felt that way. Maybe we simply thought going in that we weren't going to be able to get much accomplished to run. We didn't really make many attempts early in the game to run the ball inside, especially. or outside for that matter. We came out throwing it a little more than running it. And then when we got the lead, of course, our priority then was just not to mess it up. And we burned quite a bit of clock. We ran some ball control passes. We ended up with 24 runs, 24 passes. So I guess in that regard, we had pretty good balance. But it's difficult to beat someone when you can't rush for 100 yards. And of course, if you only have 24 attempts, it's not going to be easy to reach that 100-yard level. Today, we didn't do it. I give Kentucky some credit for that because their defense is pretty darn good. They proved that today. If we would have needed to score more than 7, I don't know. It would have been an interesting game if those 2 pick sixes hadn't happened. It might have been 7-0 at the end of the game.
Hawkeyes reborn. Corey, do you know a timetable of when a Bryant announcement of any sort may come? Again, I have heard nothing from the people that I know that are in the know. They don't know anything. So could it be, Don, if there were coaching changes, how long do you think it would take for us to hear of such? Could it be weeks? It wouldn't be. I would think it'd be this month, right? This coming month.
Well, let's face it. Some of the guys that would be attractive hires are guys that still have bowl games to do over these next few days, or maybe their bowl game was a day or two ago. So a lot of those guys, of course, are not available right now to even seriously consider another job because either they just finished a game or they're about to play one. But in that regard, the convention does follow. I don't think that's changed. The national championship is played on the 9th, as you know. So there'll be a lot of movement on or around the convention, but there probably won't be too much hiring done short of the convention either, because obviously that's a good place to efficiently interview a lot of people, would be at the NCAA convention.
Doc P wants to know status on David Cobb and Britt. Both those guys are listed on the official. I got a lisp. Official roster still. So for people questioning those guys, hold on a second. Unless my eyes are deceiving me, I don't see Justin Britt on here. Let me confirm this before I give you faulty information. No, Don. I don't see Justin Britt on the roster at all. But he's not on the roster that was released in the game notes. So, good question. He's not on there. But by the way, David Cobb is. So, again, don't know what that is. I don't know that anybody's asked Kirk of that. And by the way, I love the comments here. So, let me find the comment here. The top G, Andrew Tate. Corey should man up and ask this in a press conference. He's instead an enabler. Corey enables this. If you don't like it, ask in the press conference. You zoom into Corey, for real, man. Well, I'll tell you this, Mr. Top G, Andrew Tate. If there were more Zoom press conferences available, then I would do that. We've had one Zoom press conference with Kirk since the beginning of the season. One. And it was right after the Music City Bowl was announced. And, Don, that's not the time to grill Kirk Ferentz. And believe me, other people have asked Kirk some tough questions. How about the Ohio guy, Ohio reporter that asked him some tough questions after the Ohio State game? So, I understand you disagree with where I stand on the situation, but give me an opportunity. I've invited Kirk on this show. I will do that again at season's end. And if he's willing to come on the show, I'd be happy to have a conversation. Would love to have a conversation with Coach Ferentz. Bob says, Corey, please comment about Brian's snarky response during the pregame press conference. Well, it's a good question. I want to, we spent the last 2 hours talking about this game, and we've spent some time talking about the future. I do want to play the snippet, Don, from the press conference yesterday that bothered me. And it was a question from Des Moines Register reporter Chad Leistico. I just want to play this, and I know some people on Twitter were complimenting, praising Brian for how he responded, but the response did bother me just a little bit. Take a listen, and then we'll talk about it.
Brian, last time we talked to you was before Ohio State game. There was a lot of outside noise after that game. Does any of that make it to you, and what's your reaction when criticism filters your way, and how have you responded?
Is that a serious question?
Sure. Did you read the Ohio article?
No.
Okay.
I feel like we've covered this ground for all the Ohio guys in the room, right? My focus is on doing my job every day. Does criticism make it to me? Of course it does. My wife has criticism for me on a daily basis. All this stuff gets back to me in some form or fashion, and none of it matters because my job is every day to wake up and try to put our players in position to be successful. That's it. And whatever my reaction to it has no bearing on my ability to do my job. So I keep my focus on that. And it's just like Phil said, he's talking about playing defense. I don't think coaching is any different, right? Alignment, keys, responsibility, do your job every day. And if the things don't help you do your job, then you can't spend a lot of time worrying about them.
I understand not wanting to be distracted from your job, and you have a job to do. What bothers me is the snarky response to a fair question about criticism. To say, is that a serious question? And maybe I've just lost patience with Brian. Maybe that's the case. I'll acknowledge that maybe it's my problem. But for the question out there from whoever that was that asked the question a couple minutes ago, that's my problem with it. I just have a problem with the snarky response and the idea that these questions aren't for like that's not a real question. Well, we don't need to rehash the numbers. I mean, it's obviously a valid question. Every question that's been asked about Brian's performance has been valid, whether it's been from the Iowa media or from the guy from Ohio, the guy for Cleveland.com. They've been valid questions. So I guess my patience has run out with Brian, and I have no doubt that he's a good person. It's got nothing to do. It's nothing personal, but I'm just ready to move on, and that's where I stand on the situation. Ryan wants to know, Don, did Iowa do two-a-days for their bowl prep?
No. I don't recall. You got to realize back in the day, it seemed to me like there was a finite number of bowl practices you could have. Maybe I'm wrong. I heard the other day that they're unlimited. I don't know if that's true or not, but I don't recall 2 a days because you got to realize they're in school. They're in school, so they got to worry about getting to class and they got to worry about final exams. 2 a days. They don't even have 2 a days in August anymore. There are no 2 a days anymore.
Right.
So back in the day, we had 2 a days, of course, in August. I remember vividly, we would have 20 practices, if you can imagine, in 11 days. We would have 2 a day, 2 a day, 2 a day, 2 a day, and then thank God for Sunday, because that was a day of recovery. And then we'd have 2 a days the next week too, and 20 practices in 11 days. You got to be smart about that. Obviously, you could do a lot of damage to those players if you weren't smart about how you approach those 20 practices. So some of those practices, of course, were scaled back, and we're not even in full gear. And nowadays, of course, they don't even have double sessions anymore. They have 1 practice a day. That's it, even in August. And that's probably a good rule because it gives the players a better chance to stay healthy.
By the way, credit to Rob Howell for that video I just played a few minutes ago. And Brian says it's because why at that time? Why ask again? I don't believe Brian has earned the right to dictate when the media asks him certain questions. I don't believe that's within his right to dictate to the media when it's valid to ask a question. And guess what? The media has very limited availability to Brian Ferentz. That's the reality. This may be the last time they get to speak with Brian until spring, Don. I'm not aware of any media availability before then. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's my issue with it. Uncle Rico says, Don, I went to Cracker Barrel last night, asked the waitress to bring me the Coach Patterson special, but easy on the upside. Love and behold, 5 minutes later, they rolled out naked with peach cobbler. Obviously, he's talking naked boot anyways.
Must have been naked at 1, too. There was naked to the right, I bet. Fake left and go right. Unless they were left-handed.
Okay. Jason says, we can't expect that the D will be as good as next year with everything we lose. I would agree with that. You're losing a couple of really good players. I mean, Jack Campbell being one, Riley Moss being another. They're potentially losing Seth Benson, Noah Shannon, etc. I will say this, Don. I got lots of confidence in Phil Parker and what we saw from the young guys today, like Wampa, like DeJean. I really liked how Sebastian Castro played today at all levels. He had a really nice playing coverage. Thought he made a couple nice plays in the backfield. He's a good one. And they got some good guys coming in. I think they're going to be fine. Not saying they'll be to the level of the defense this year and be able to produce. But, boy, they produced a lot of turnovers last year. And we kind of say this every year, and Phil Parker finds a way to reload.
Yeah, you're right. We're gonna always be solid on defense. Maybe our defense won't be quite as good as this year. On the other hand, our schedule is not quite as tough as this year either. So our crossover games do not include Michigan or Ohio State. We do have Penn State on the schedule, but the fact that we don't play both Michigan and Ohio State is a significant improvement, of course.
Kyle wants to know any thoughts on Brian Ferentz, retaining Brian Ferentz instead of moving on prior to the bowl game. One advantage to moving on is clarity as the portal closes on the 18th to both retain and potentially get transfers. Yes, Kyle, I agree with you to an extent. And if you want to prolong this, then you're going to miss out on an opportunity. I can tell you on good authority that Caden Proctor, and people don't like me even bringing up Caden Proctor, Don, but I can tell you with good authority that Caden Proctor's camp was never given any indication that Brian was moving on. So even if he does move on, I'm going to ask the question, why? Why did you not make the best offensive player to ever play in the state? Why did you not make him aware of this? And I'm not saying that was any part of his decision to flip to Alabama, but that is a fair question. And Don, I'm sure you're not an advocate for firing guys before the bowl game, but with the early signing period being bumped up a lot earlier than it used to be, as well as the transfer portal window, and this is the first year it's been in place as it is currently, I think there is reason why a number of schools not only got rid of guys before their bowl games, but actually during the season. There is a reason why those programs went forward with such. So I understand where you're coming from, Kyle. And Brian wants to know, did anyone hear why Van Ness wasn't playing much? I don't know how many snaps Van Ness got today, Don, but he didn't make much of an impact that I saw on film, which typically he is. He's a guy who's an impact guy. Douglas wants to know, Mr. Patterson, how much of the bad line play is from being manhandled and how much is it from play calling?
There are elements of both, no doubt about it. Manhandled is probably not a fair choice of words. I don't know that we got manhandled, but obviously there's an effort to sustain a block, and if you can sustain it for an additional half second, that makes a difference on a play. So we can do a better job of sustaining our blocks, no doubt about that. But again, Kentucky's defensive line is above average, so the challenge was a little tougher than what we normally have.
Next question here from Steve. Coach, do you think that the zone blocking is better than man-on-man blocking? It's a good question.
I'm sorry, Corey, I lost you for a second.
Do you think that zone blocking is better than man blocking? Gap blocking, I guess you could say.
Man-on-man blocking. Gap schemes, I think a good running game has elements of both. And we have elements of both. I know you're familiar with inside and outside zone because that's really what we hang our hat on. But gap schemes still have a place. And man-on-man blocking is another option too. A simple isolation play, you know what I mean by an isolation play maybe. Basically, you block the man over you, or you might call it a lead play, and you have a fullback that leads on a linebacker. What we used to call we had a good name for that play. It was 43 and 47 pop out, because the whole idea is to pop that linebacker out of the hole. As fullback versus linebacker, that's old school football, but it still has a place. Obviously, if you have an animal at fullback, that's a good way to approach it. Is just to attack those linebackers and have a back that can break off that contact. But you don't see much of that anymore. But it was part of football back in the day, and it could still be part of football. To pick a scheme, I don't know. There are probably some proponents of zone blocking that say if you zone block, just get really, really good at that. And if you do, then you don't need much else. I don't know if I agree with that. I think I would still have gap schemes in my offense, regardless of how good a zone team I was.
DC Hawkeye wants to know, is there a chance that Arlen Bruce IV comes back? I would seriously doubt that. He visited Mississippi State not that long ago. I saw he got into it with a Twitter account today. Somebody ripping him for not being able to return punts very well, and he went back and forth with them. I don't like the dynamic there, and I would be surprised maybe shocked if he comes back. He didn't play in the bowl game. He's not on the roster, so that would be an indication that he's gone. Chris says, what are the chances Barta fires Brian? I would say slim and none, and Slim left town.
I thought you might say that.
I mean, I would say it's very doubtful that happens. I think the best case scenario, if you want Brian gone, is that they find a way to ease him out easily. Like, I mean, they're not going to fire it. Can you imagine Monday comes along, Don, and the release from the University of Iowa, Gary Barta fires Brian? That's not going to happen. I mean, come on, let's be real here. It's not going to happen, even if people want that to happen. Shane says, since Iowa has such offensive problems, is Britt healthy and expected to return? Well, again, according to the game notes, he's on the roster right now. Will David Cobb play? I mentioned that. He's on the roster. Don't know his status. Shane does add, as we were talking about DBs, I've always been interested in the career of Dallas Craddock, as have I. He was a 4-star who never saw the field. We played today, so did he change his mind in the portal? Not that I'm aware of, Shane. Kirk was asked about Dallas. He and Terry Roberts are the two guys that were on the roster. And I had somebody try to tell me, well, it's because those guys were graduates. Kirk allowed them to stay because they were graduates. Well, Alex Padilla is not on the roster, Don, and he graduated. So, I don't know the reason why Terry Roberts and Dallas Craddock were different. I'm assuming Terry Roberts was hurt. Dallas did play today, and it sounds like Dallas wants to be closer to home, finish off his career, go somewhere and play, and good for him for doing so. Steve wants to know, can we agree the Labus being a dual threat thing was slightly exaggerated? I mean, play calling is a big part of this, Don. I don't know that Iowa really utilized his legs as much as I expected them to, but
no, we didn't feature him that much.
He's not Kyler Murray. He's not Patrick Mahomes.
No, he's not.
He's not.
Incidentally, talking about defensive line play, this surprised me, but I did notice him today. Logan Lee had a total of 6 tackles, and half a tackle for loss. So that's a pretty good line. 4 solos, 2 assists. Deontay Craig had 4 tackles, 3 solo, 1 assist. You noticed him. Van Ness had a total of 3 tackles. Joe Evans 3. And then looking at the back end, Xavier had 8 total tackles, 7 solos, 1 assist. Of course, he had the pick 6. Jack Campbell had 8 solos, a total of 10 tackles, and of course had a sack as well. So typical line for Jack. Seth Benson had 7 tackles. That's kind of what you expect out of Seth. Sebastian Castro, 5 tackles and a couple of big plays that were related to early in the game. I mentioned an open field tackle that was a big play. And then, of course, he defended the deep throw and defended that well, too. The Kentucky receivers were frustrated that they couldn't separate from our guys. Our guys have a good idea of how to play, and we've talked about hand checking in the past. Corey, you've got to know what you can get by with and what you can't. And our guys do a good job of knowing what they can get by with. And sometimes that does frustrate a receiver. I know that happened today.
Doug wants to know, did Xavier lose his year of eligibility by playing in this game? No, he lost his year of eligibility earlier in the season. They've been playing him on special teams a lot. So he'll be a sophomore next year. And I don't think they expect him, if he pans out to be as good as he's cut out to be, Donnie, and will be here 5 years anyways. So
right.
It probably doesn't matter anyways.
You heard me say before, red shirting's overrated. Those really good ones, get them out there. Let them play.
Same with Cooper, right? I mean,
yes.
When you talk about did he play last year? By the way, I'm looking at the Iowa website right now. They list him as a sophomore.
Okay, so he did play enough to use up a year.
It appears so. Yes, he saw action in 7 games last year. Ed says that passing with 2 minutes left is embarrassing.
I was surprised. I admit that. Matter of fact, I wrote them down as they happened. With 1:40 left, my comment is, so now we throw deep. With 1:40 on the clock, we're up 21-0. And I'm thinking, are Kirk and Mark Stoops not getting along? What's going on here? It was overthrown. With 58 seconds left, another naked. This one was broken up. I think there was a guy in our face, as I recall. Pass broken up. And then with 50 seconds left, another pass thrown incomplete. So we threw 3 passes in the last 1:40 of the game. I do know that. All 3 were incomplete. But we were still trying to I don't know what we were doing. We were maybe just trying to see if certain players could do certain things. I wouldn't want to read too much into it. We weren't desperate to score. If we would have been, we'd have had a better chance to score, I guess. But it is a little bit odd that we were throwing passes and stopping the clock at the end of the game.
Brian says that Kirk asked Alex Padilla if he would be interested in playing in the bowl game while still being in the portal. Alex said no. I'd like to know the source on this first. I've had multiple people say this to me now. I've never heard Kirk say that. I've never heard Alex Padilla come out and say that. So if there's somebody reporting that, that's fine. But until I hear that from either one of them, no one's told me that.
Is that maybe a typo? Is that supposed to be Brian F rather than Brian E, maybe?
Good one, Don. Let's see. Brand Miguel says, do you know why Iowa had the sideline warning at the end? I thought it was because there seemed to be a lot of late hits by Kentucky not called.
Nothing I'm aware of.
Yeah. And then Brian says, Tom Kakert said it in a podcast. I don't listen to other podcasts, so that's news to me. I'll trust that to be true on your part. I still don't understand if a guy opts out of a bowl game, Don, does that mean you just delete him from the roster? I mean, he's bided his time. I don't know. And that may be true. Maybe that's why Terry and Dallas were the only guys listed on there, because Alex would have been listed on there had he opted to stay. But again, we're just trusting other people who are reporting this. Just like when I give you information on here, you're trusting me to be credible and my sources to be credible. So maybe that's the case, Don. I just hadn't heard that.
Did you notice today that there was a Will Levis sighting on the bench?
Oh, there was.
Yeah. Just for a split second, they showed him, and I think they commented about him being on the bench, which seemed to me to be a little bit odd, because frankly, if you're going to opt out of the game, then I don't know if I want you on our bench. Maybe every situation is different, but I don't know. You tell me. Was our captain that opted out of the game, was he on our bench today? I don't know. Maybe he felt it would be awkward for him to be.
He's not on the roster, so.
Yeah, if he's on the bench, he's walking around without a bench pass, maybe. So you're right. I don't think he was even in Nashville.
Brian E says the fact that you called him Brian F, that hurts deep, Don.
I apologize, Brian.
just for the record, Don. So there was somebody on the sideline who was wearing the red hat, had black on and was wearing the red hat. There was Carson May. Then there was another guy wearing a red hat. Who was that guy? Somebody asked me, was that Alex Padilla? I said, no, it's not Alex Padilla. He's not on the roster. Could that have been Spencer Petras? I couldn't tell from my angle. It didn't look tall enough to be Petras.
I find it hard to believe that if Spencer would have been on the sideline, they would have found him during the game and they would have commented about him being there.
So you didn't see the guy in the black?
I never saw Spencer on the sideline at all.
Okay.
If you're coming off shoulder surgery, you shouldn't be down there because you're at risk of being injured.
It's halftime of the semifinal game between Michigan and TCU. By the way, TCU winning 21-6 right now. We're going to get to that in a second. So I promise we're going to end this in 2 minutes. But I want to just, since we're talking about this, let me share the photo that somebody tagged me in on Twitter earlier, Don, regarding who this person was, and maybe you can give us an indication.
This is the red hat you're talking about?
Yes. Let me find.
I'm assuming it's our fifth quarterback, whoever he might be. I'm saying now he's our third quarterback.
Well, who's the third quarterback, Don?
I don't know. I mean, we talked about maybe Tom Hartley being one of them, right, for the scout team. I don't know. Maybe Hartley was wearing the red hat. I think I'd recognize him if I saw him, though.
Okay, let me share my screen here, Don, so you can see who this person is. We'll go ahead and go over to Twitter. So you see there. Let me go back here. I get this smaller, so you can see. Let me hide Brian's comment. Let me get rid of Joe's stats. So you see here you see number 3 Carson May there with the red hat on, right?
My guess is that's one of our student workers that is an analyst or a grad assistant of some sort. You know, he's somebody within support staff that maybe works as a signal guy all the time anyway. You know, we have people that do that. They're not always players that are suited up. Sometimes they're student assistants.
Okay, good answer to the question. Corey and Don, with UCLA and USC coming into the Big Ten and Oklahoma, Texas going to the SEC, do you see both conferences eventually merging to form a super conference to obtain a massive media deal? I don't, Don. I don't know what that would look like. That's kind of an off question, but your thoughts on conference expansion as it stands right now?
Well, I don't see them somehow playing a lot of games against each other. I don't see that happening because somebody has to lose. Spencer was there in a sling, hugging Joe. Okay, good. Spencer was on the sideline. They simply chose not to show him, I guess.
Well, Robert's saying that Spencer was in a red hat, but I don't know if that's true. It didn't look like Spencer from behind. It didn't look tall enough to be Spencer, but I could be wrong. And DC Hawkeye says he saw Spencer give Labus a hug. Robert, the same callers every show, and the rest of us can't get on the show. What's up with that?
Corey, I don't know that you play favorites. I don't think you do.
I answer the phone line as it comes in here. So, Robert, if you're still on, you just commented, didn't you, Robert? Yeah, you just commented, Robert. Call. I mean, the phone line is, you want to call. I mean, we were going to shut this thing down. If you want to call, and we missed your call earlier, I've been answering the phone, the calls as they come in. The join link is in the description below, or you can call us at 515-635-1601. 515-635-1601. I do not play favorites. If the same people are calling in, it's because they've made the effort to call in. And Steve wants to know, I saw a podcast where he's talking about Josh Gaddis was earmarked for Iowa as the OC. Anything there? I don't believe so. I think that's purely speculation and rumors, Don.
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if that was the case. And David says he thinks it's a grad student in the red hat that's been on the sideline all season. All right, last chance for Robert to call in. Robert, we're waiting for you. All right. To wrap this thing up, folks, and thank you again for being here. Well, let's see. We've got somebody who's tried to call in. Are you there, Robert? Robert.
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Robert. You've been trying to call in, and we got you here, sir. If you were trying to call in earlier, I guess it was just luck of the draw because your call came straight through.
I tried, but that's okay. That's okay.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Happy New Year to you both. I did want to say if Don doesn't want to be on the field, did he sign an extension contract for the next 10 years to do the show?
Don?
Corey, is this a good time to say there are no contracts involved with the show here?
Yes, there are no contracts involved, but our agents
we
are
need to have one.
We're still in negotiations, Robert.
Yeah, we need to write one up real quick.
Work on that.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah. Everybody keeps on saying about the plays and how, and I agree, with the running plays and all this type of stuff. Do you think maybe it was the preparation of the game with a quarterback that never played the game before? Maybe he didn't know very many plays.
I'm sure that's true. But he's been here 2 years, Robert. So I don't know.
That's true.
If he doesn't know the plays, then who do you blame on that? I would blame his position coach.
Brian.
I wonder who that
is. They practiced 3 weeks and getting ready for this game. The 3 weeks of preparation.
Well, in 2 years, he's been here. This is year number 2, year and a half. He's been here a year and a half. So, I
2 football seasons.
Shouldn't be an excuse, but I understand he's not running with the 1s and 2s throughout the season. You run a lot of scout, but I think a lot of it comes down to play calling and coaching, Robert.
I think it's the play calling and the preparation for the game.
Yep.
He just wasn't prepared. To me, he didn't look like he was prepared for the game. That's what it looked like to me. I don't know. Also, the other comment I had, do you agree with, it doesn't make any difference, but do you agree with the MVP of the game?
Who was the MVP?
Was it DeJean?
Yes.
I thought it should have been Sebastian Castro, frankly. I really thought I was really impressed with him. Don, who would you have labeled MVP? But Jack Campbell could have had a stake to that claim, but
I guess Cooper. The only argument for Cooper. Let's face it. When we're up by 14, the game's not over. Corey, you've always heard me talk about the magic number of 17. So the pick six that Cooper had was really the nail in the coffin, and he killed several punts inside the 10. They probably factored those in, and he returned the punt for 34 yards or whatnot. So when you add all those together, I think Cooper's a solid choice. You could argue in favor of a couple other guys too, but Cooper's certainly an okay choice when you factor in the kicking game, both as a cover guy and a return specialist.
Well, even the announcers said, which I agree, I think it should have been Jack Campbell, and even the announcers were saying that Jack Campbell was going to be the MVP, and he turned out not to be.
There was several directions you could have go. Like I said, I was really impressed with Sebastian Castro all day, and he's not necessarily a guy you'd peg pregame to be the MVP, but they had a lot of guys stand out on defense, that's for sure. And Torrey, hey, we could also have thrown Torrey Taylor. What a day for him!
I was going to say, that would have been a great choice, because what a day of punting. What a day.
Absolutely.
And for us to be lucky enough to keep him next year, we're blessed.
Absolutely, Robert.
As far as I'm concerned.
Well, Robert, we'll wait and see what we got here in the next few weeks. We'll know a lot about the program.
Happy New Year to you both, and let's get that 10-year contract signed.
Sounds good, sir.
Thanks, Robert.
God, we got Robert in here. All right. Iowa defeating Kentucky 21-0 on the shoulders of a strong defensive performance and excellent special teams play. Joey Labus, his first career start, did what he needed to do, right? He managed the game pretty well for a guy who's a backyard quarterback. 14-24, 139 yards and a touchdown, just 67 rushing yards for Iowa. Actually got outrushed by the Wildcats, who were shut out. The Hawkeyes need a lot of improvement on offense. We know that. Third down and fourth down, man. 0 for 13 combined. Those numbers have to get better. They have to get better for Iowa to be elite and to be competing for championships. And I'm not talking about conference championships. I'm talking about division championships. I'm talking about conference championships. Please subscribe to the show, folks. If you've not been here before, if you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button as well. That does help, and donating to the channel helps. Venmo, Cash App, PayPal. You can donate by credit card by means of PayPal. Super Chat. There's a little button on here for that as well. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at From the Hawkeye on Twitter and Instagram, and of course From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Facebook. Become a premium subscriber by clicking join next to From the Hawkeye of the Storm. And of course, shop Amazon with us. Link in the description below. When you purchase Amazon products, Hawkeye merchandise, whatever the case may be, purchase them through our link and you're helping the channel. Thank you to the Johnny O Show for his help on developing that link as well as our merchandise and setting up our shop. The merch is here. It's available. What's the upside? Merch from the Hawkeye of the Storm merch and more designs coming. We're not going anywhere, even though this is the end of the season. We're not going anywhere. So be sure to cash in on the merch. Please share our show out on social media, even after the show is cataloged, because other people will watch it. Majority of our listeners, Don, I'd say the vast majority of our listeners listen to the show on demand. So we appreciate those individuals, the non-live viewers as well. You know, a lot of people have other engagements after the game. Some people probably pick the semifinal game. We appreciate the people who are here today. And we'll go to we'll make one more exception for someone who's been very loyal to the show over the last year. Let's add Erica.
Hello.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. I'm happy about our win today. I'm not going to get into the talk about Brian because a lot's already been said and I agree with all of it. But basically I wanted to ask Coach, you're always referring to certain variables or things that we win or that we need to win in order to have a W at the end of the game. How did we do on those factors or on those variables? And I know you don't want to name them, but I'm just curious how we did.
Oh, I don't mind naming them after the game. That's not such a problem. I just don't want to name them before the game. First touchdown of the game, we won that, and that was 88% win. First quarter scoring, it was a tie, so no one won that. Explosive plays. I don't know who won that. I think we did because I don't know that they ever had an explosive play. We maybe only had one.
Mm-hmm.
We only had one play that was 20 yards or more.
Yeah, I don't
That
think
was-
either of the teams had an explosive play. I mean, I was obviously paying more attention to Iowa than Kentucky, but I didn't see anything explosive on Kentucky's side either.
Laporta's play was considered explosive.
Yeah, I think that's the only one. The only one for the game.
The first half where he was like kind of turning around and beating out the defense, right? That's the one you were referring to?
That's where he ran over a lot of would-be tacklers.
Yeah.
Rushing attempts, you'll find this interesting. In Kentucky's 9 games, the team that had more rushing attempts, their record was 8-0, 100% win. Today, Kentucky had more rushing attempts than we did. But let's face it, it's all because of the 2 pick sixes, the 2 defensive scores. So it's no wonder that they had more rushing attempts because we had to give up a couple of our possessions when we scored on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you zeroed in on the 5 teams that beat Kentucky, they each won the following 5 parameters. First touchdown of the game, we did that. First quarter scoring, we failed. Total offense, we won that. Even though it was only 206, it was more than their 186 or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Rushing yards, they outrushed us by 1 yard. Sacks, we won sacks too. So the majority of the parameters that mattered the most, we did win. But the big one, of course, is 2 defensive touchdowns.
Right. One other thing I wanted to get your perspective on is, and some people listening to this might not agree, but I'm wondering why or how it is that Petrus would be considered the better quarterback consider what we saw today. We didn't see a ton of sacks. We didn't see any interceptions from Joe or from Joey. So, and I don't see how, I guess what I'm saying is that this is just another indictment on this coaching staff again, particularly the quarterback coach. I feel that Joey has a lot of potential and he did better on the field almost. And I don't know if that's possibly because Kentucky's defense maybe wasn't as good as expected or something like that. I don't know enough about Kentucky to make that call, but I just kind of wanted to get your perspectives on that.
Well, to defend Spencer a little bit, we asked Spencer to do a lot more than what we asked Joey to do today. We didn't give Joey much to do today. And what he was asked to do, he did just fine. But we didn't ask him to make any difficult throws.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one reason that we won today is we didn't ask him to do too much. We didn't overload his plate with what we needed him to do.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, but still, the Kentucky defense, they were big enough certainly to try to rush him and try to sack him more than they did. So I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, let's not
Maybe I'm being
forget
a
on
bit
offense we scored a grand total of 6 points today, and then the PAT made 7. But
Don,
but
let me
only
just
one.
add this. The offense,
Go ahead.
the Kentucky defense was down some players due to opt-outs. Erica and I mean, Labus numbers are modest: 14-24, $139, 1 touchdown. There were games where Petrus didn't throw interceptions. I'm not saying you're wrong, Erica, but it's a small sample size, and of course, Don's right. They did put a lot more on Spencer's shoulders. The bottom line is, I don't think we have reason to worry about either guy because, frankly, I don't think either guy is starting next year. So, we're unless Cade goes down, you're probably not going to see Joe Labus start another game here, frankly, because I think if things go to plan, Cade ends up being the starter, and then Joe probably transfers after next season. I hope that's not the case. I'd love to keep him around, but that's the reality of college football nowadays.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. The other thing too, that part of that presser that you played with, with Brian's answer to why didn't you do better, basically was the question, I guess. I saw a recording of the presser that was different where it showed both Phil Parker and Brian Ferentz as Brian was speaking. And I noticed that Phil looked a little bit uncomfortable, which I thought was interesting. And I can get why. I don't think I need to spell it out for anybody, but I just thought that was an interesting thing to see.
Yeah. No, there's a reason why Phil would be uncomfortable.
Yep. I don't think we need to spell it out like I said, but anyway, thank you so much for taking my call and thanks for another great season and Happy New Year to everybody listening and to both of you as well.
Thank you, Erica. Appreciate you being here all season.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, Erica.
All right. Thank you to everybody. Once again, Harpo, he says, just understand you're adding to the community aspect on the show. You put people together with like-minded interests. We love having you here. I agree. Brian, thank you for the compliment as well. And thank you for supporting both this show and our show with Coach Close. Same with Sam. Thank you, Sam, for being here. Uncle Rico, thank you for being here. Appreciate you supporting the merchandise. Takun or Takan, thank you for supporting everything. Brian, thank you. Steve, thank you. And everyone else, thank you. Don, I won't get emotional. It does make me a little bit sad to know that this is our last show, post-game show of the season, but to hold off the tears and hold back the emotion, we've got one more show that you've agreed to do probably in a couple weeks, obviously after the season's over, and maybe we'll get some news. I'm thinking maybe in a couple weeks. Don't have any date nailed down with you yet, but for fans, stay tuned maybe mid-January. Does that sound good to you, Don?
Sure.
And we may get some resounding answers from the transfer portal as well. So, Don, again, we're not done, but I want to thank you again for being part of this show. You make this enjoyable for me. I do consider this work, but it's fun work. So thank you for being here and being part of the show as always.
I feel the same way, Corey. Thank you.
All right, folks. For Coach Don Patterson, I'm Corey Brada. This show will be podcasted via audio, Spotify, Apple, Google, Anchor, all the above. And I will be back tomorrow with Coach Gary Close recapping Iowa Penn State men's basketball on Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Take care, everybody, and enjoy the college football semifinals.